All right, welcome to the Krueg Show. Big Thursday night. Canada just beat USA, but we're talking Niners. John Lund is in the house. Let's go. All right, welcome to the Krueg Show. Thursday night. Feels like a Friday night, but it's a Thursday night. We're brought to you, of course, by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket. Get some brisket chili. Tell them that Krueg sent you. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. My man, Anthony Catania, is at 205 Cypress Avenue, Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. For all your sports cards and collectible needs, tell them Krueg sent you down there. And, of course, we are brought to you by BetUS. Over Johnny's head there is our BetUS sign. BetUS. With BetUS, you get the fastest payouts in the industry and easy withdrawals, live wagering on all major games, plus you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. On top of that, you also get your own personal account manager. We'll make a wager before we get out of here tonight. Head over to BetUS.com today, though, and use their promo code YouTube150, and you'll get 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% sign-up bonus on your next two, up to $2,000. So, again, sign up at BetUS.com. Use that code YouTube150 to claim your offer, and thanks to BetUS for being a proud sponsor of the Krueg Show. All right. We titled this one 49er Culture Shift, Why Debo's Exit Marks a New Era. This was kind of an interesting day. Sometimes, sometimes the offseason is filled with a bunch of nothing, and there's not a lot to talk about. But today, Tim Kawakami, Tim comes to the rescue. Whenever we need content, John, he's there for us. And Tim's got an article up at the SF Standard. Debo's exit is a sign of the 49ers' new hardline attitude. And, I got no problem with a hardline attitude at this point. I mean, they won 6 games this year. They were a Super Bowl favorite going into the year, and they couldn't even get to 500, nowhere close to 500. I think it's pretty clear that Debo is going to be an ex-49er by draft day, probably by March 22nd, before that $15.4 million bonus comes due. But beyond Debo, Kawakami is saying that there's evidence of a new approach and a new attitude in Santa Clara, John. He says it's harder-edged, more ruthless on the financial side, less forgiving on the performance side. And the Yorks are selling, their franchise is worth $9 billion. They're trying to sell off 10%. So they're looking for somebody to give them $900 million. I don't know if that means that they're in a cash flow problem or if this is just about the future and that kind of thing. But the Niners are going into, season 9 of this regime with Lynch and Shanahan. And Kawakami is suggesting that he's heard from sources a couple things. One, that Debo was 20 pounds overweight last year, and that led to a subpar year, that he's past his prime at 29, that Debo himself is frustrated with the team and obviously asked to be traded, and then they're headed towards a divorce. And this is a dramatic thing because he used to be a made man and Shanahan's favorite. But the other part of this that I thought was really interesting is, according to Kawakami, that poor behavior and slumping players will not be tolerated anymore. And this offseason, according to him, is time to, quote, counteract some faulty decisions, close quote. And he basically references, the decision not to trade Debo 3 years ago, the decision not to trade Debo last year to the Ravens during the draft. There's a lot of lingering frustration, according to Kawakami, about the Ayuk negotiation. $30 million, against the cap last year. And then maybe they overpaid Nick Bosa. So what do you make? I mean, of the story. I mean, we'll get into the Debo angles because there's a couple launch points for pretty good discussions on Debo. But what do you think overall about this kind of new world order that Kawakami is describing down in Santa Clara?
I don't know if it's as drastic as what he's saying, but if you look at logic, they still believe, and this, they still believe they're in a championship window. I do too. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I do think it lines up both free agency and draft for their needs in either. The cap going up is going to help them, as it is the rest of the league, as far as getting Brock Purdy's deal done. But what starts to happen too is this thing is dwindling. And so this offseason, for example, you got to get rid of Debo. You might have to take a hit there probably. You got to redo Kittle's deal because he's not going to play at a cap number of 22. You got to redo Warner's deal because he's not going to play at a cap number of 29.2. You got to get Brock's deal done. And in order to get everything done and for Prague to do this in the fashion that they want to and be that team that is still in a Super Bowl window, then they do have to be ruthless. They do have to be more Bill Walsh than Al Davis. And I think one thing, as much as I love Kyle, he does in an Al Davis kind of a way fall in love with players personally. So he loves Debo. He loves Ayuk. Ayuk's on the field and they're in negotiations against each other. And he's giving big bro hugs to Brandon Ayuk last training camp. That's not how it works, Kyle. I love you, man. But one of the reasons everybody loves him is he's one of the guys to a certain extent. Now, he'll get on you, and he's not afraid to get on you. You know that. But he does play favorites with certain guys, and you can't be that way. You're their boss. It's kind of like your kid. You're not their best friend. You're not their brother. You're their parent. And I think that sometimes Kyle gets a little too close for guys. I mean, he and Joe Staley are tight. Like, he's got guys that play for him and used to play for him that he's incredibly tight with. And to a certain extent, that's fine. But it's one of the same reasons why, as a boss in any business, you don't really fraternize with the group. You're not one of the guys. You don't go out for beers and shots, those kind of things. You have to keep a professional distance. And I think sometimes what happens is he falls in love with guys personally, like Brock Purdy. He loves Brock Purdy. He's got to be able to objectively look at him. He's going to get his deal. I'm not saying he's not. But as far as Debo, like you said, we saw the side angle at the Super Bowl. He's in shape. He's in the shape of a pear. When Debo came in great shape this year. Yeah, a great shape of a pear. Like, he wasn't in shape. So he was in shape like I'm in shape. So I think there is absolutely truth to that. But I also think desperation for this comes, and the change of philosophy to a certain extent comes because this window is not very big anymore. If there is a window. And then you have to tighten up a lot of things and make tough decisions. Why compound the problem and keep Debo because you like Debo or because you got to pay Debo? You can't compound problems anymore. If a guy starts to slip, like I'm not suggesting Warner is slipping or anything, but Dre Greenlaw is a perfect example. Who doesn't love Dre Greenlaw, right? Who doesn't love him? He's a great guy. He's an energy guy. Everybody loves him. 5th rounder. We've loved him from the minute he got here. But if the 49ers evaluation says he's slipping, come off the Achilles, and the kid with the Jets, Sherwood, is the guy, or you've mentioned a bunch of guys from the draft that are run and hit fast guys, then Fred Warner needs to have somebody else next to him. This isn't about, we love Dre and the things he's done. Here's a thank you contract. You got to win games. Like Jared Brown is another guy. Like Jared Brown, everybody loved, and then he gave up so many big plays last year. And it's like, I know everybody likes this kid, and he's I had him on a camp last year. Really, what a great kid. But I would get a veteran safety in here. Like, I can't mess around anymore. I can't wait for development. I can't, it's nice guy football. And you guys have a short window, if you have a window at all. And it can't get personal, man. It's all about business.
It's funny you mentioned maybe getting a veteran safety. I don't know if you saw today, but the Miami Dolphins announced today that they will not use the franchise tag on Javon Holland. Javon Holland went to Bishop O'Dowd. He went to Oregon. I've met his dad. His dad's a Bay Area guy. Javon's still very much a Bay Area guy. So, man, I mean, he's a
great call by you.
He's a young free agent too. I think he might be the youngest free agent. Mm-hmm. I think he might be 24 or 25. He's really, really young. So I like the idea of a young free agent, and safety is such a hard spot to fill in the draft because the college game's so different from the pro game. And it's like, if you have
you don't want a rookie back there, right? You're going to make a mistake, and that's a touchdown. I mean, like, a rookie makes a mistake in some places, it's bad, but you make a mistake in the secondary. And I like Mustafa coming downhill. That's fine. And they're not going to be able to re-sign Hufanga. He's going to cost too much. But Jared Brown made a lot of mistakes last year, and he's supposed to be your deep safety. And you've got such a young secondary. It is. Mustafa's probably going to start. Bernardo Green is a second-year guy. I like Lenore a lot. I think they could use a corner. You and I have talked about DJ Reed just because Saleh knows him so much. But a veteran safety who knows what he's doing back there is worth a lot. And I know they have a lot of positions to fill, but all of a sudden they got a little extra money on the cap, $53 million increase in the last 2 years. Look, everybody gets that too. So the money is going to get spread out and it's going to be more expensive. But a guy like that, we haven't talked about the position, is really important to to get a young secondary together. And I wouldn't be surprised if they looked at somebody like that. That's a great call on Holland, by the way. That's a really good call.
Javon Holland would be a good one. I want to check his game log to see exactly what it looked like this year. But I mean, he's a really good safety, and he's a veteran, but he's a young veteran. He's got a lot of talent. He's a true free safety.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing with the Niners: Mustafa's a strong safety. Hafanga's a strong safety. Jair Brown's a strong safety. What do I mean by that? These guys all are better closer to the line of scrimmage, and they're
better going forward than backwards.
And they're not great in coverage. Okay, so just looking at Javon Holland, let me take a look at his game log. He had 42 tackles, 1 forced fumble, no interceptions this year, but he had 7 tackles. Let's see, I'm looking. He's had, he's basically, 7, 2, 4, 3, 3, 6, 6. 5, 5. Okay. And the Miami defensive front was not as good this year, so that is a big part of it. He only forced 1 fumble and he didn't have any picks. So maybe they're willing to let him go. I mean, he's 24. Yeah, he's 24 years old.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, that's a young free agent. This guy's going to be his best football is going to be here in San Francisco if you could get that done. He was a second-round pick.
Yeah, and what they have to do, and this goes to what your original premise of this discussion was, is it's time. As these guys are getting older and you're top heavy, there's certain guys like I want to keep Kittle around. I thought he had a hell of a year and he could have shut it down and Warner could have shut it down. There's certain guys that I'm willing to let grow old on my team because they've proven that they can do it. But when I look at this team, Holland is 24, Sherwood is 25. Like you start looking at guys, you've got to keep this thing going. And I'd look at a team like the Ravens, for example. They played the Niners in Super Bowl 47 with John Harbaugh. They've had a couple of down years, but not very many. They're plus 500 most of the time because what they do is they just keep restocking it. They keep restocking it with their kind of players. And if a guy gets a little long in the tooth, then they make the decision that they've got to get younger at the position. And that's what they do. And they draft well. They sign smart free agents, all those kind of things. They know what they are, and they sign those kind of players consistently. But as everybody nationally, at least, are saying that, this is it for the Niners and that window is closing. Well, the way it doesn't close is if, like you said, you get ruthless and you say, look, we love these guys and they're going to be welcome someday and they're going to be in the Ring of Honor or whatever the case may be but you got to make a tough decision. And I think it's a tough decision on Dre Greenlaw, but it's probably the right one to let him go. A couple other guys like that on this team. You've got to make some really hard decisions and you've got to have faith in some young players to keep this thing going because you still have a base of players in Brock and he's going to re-sign in some young players on this team, but you've got to not only hit in the draft, but like you just said, a 24-year-old accomplished safety from the Bay Area, and you need a deep safety. That really should be the number one guy on their list in the offseason as far as somebody that they go for and could be attainable.
Yeah, no, you got to remember this too. This is Northern California. It's expensive to live here. Football players make good money, but they're not like basketball or baseball players where they're making crazy money. And the cost of living does matter. And also, let's be honest, the Bay Area has gotten so much bad pub nationally during the election year that there's a whole lot of people that are like, this is the last place they ever want to come. And, even though the Niners are an iconic franchise and possibly inside their Super Bowl window. So you may want to look at a couple guys who, I'm from there. I don't buy into all that stuff they said about the Bay Area. I want to be there. And I'll take less to be there, or I want to be there and I'm motivated to be there. So Javon Holland, to me, I would like to see the Niners, John, handle free agency the way that Gutekunst handles it for Green Bay. He builds through the draft almost exclusively, but he'll handpick, I want this guy and that guy. What did he do this year? He said, I'll take Xavier McKinney, safety, and I'll take Josh Jacobs, running back. And look what happened. Now they didn't go to the Super Bowl. They kind of crapped out at the end, but not because of those two guys. McKinney was monster. He had like 7 takeaways. Jacobs gave them an element that I thought made them a significantly better football team. Even though I like Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs is quite a bit better. So that's how I would like to see the Niners play free agency. And maybe, the two guys would be, the safety that we just talked about, Javon Holland, and maybe either Drew Dahlman, who would give you a point of attack center. And he's from Stanford, and his dad played for the Niners and lives in California. Or how about DJ Jones, who obviously is from Greenville, South Carolina, but played with the Niners. And obviously, he would be a very popular guy to plug the middle of that defense, which is another one of their needs. So just an idea. But I'd love to see the Niners do most of the building in the draft, but, hit free agency for a couple spots. Now, in this Kawakami piece, there were a couple different interesting quotes. One was from Kittle, who said, I don't think you can replace Deebo Samuel. We have to build our offense differently. So that was his comment, which is an interesting comment. And then the other question is, how will the Niners replace Deebo? He wasn't very good this last year, only 796 total yards, 4 touchdowns. Do they do it in the draft? Do they do it in free agency? Does CMC get healthy? Do they get another running back and use CMC flexed out? Do they, does Pearsall and Cowing improve in year 2? Do those guys improve? Does IU come back in October or November? I mean, that's a big one. And is he diminished? But let's talk about Deebo for a second, because in the last 2 days, John, there have been 2 different reports, really. One was a report saying, you know what, Dan Graziano, they're probably going to have to release him. They're not going to get anything for him. They're most likely going to have to release him because of the structure of the cap. And, Deebo's probably the Niners are not going to get anything for him. And then there was a report today from Jeremy Fowler, who's all over this stuff for ESPN. And he says that, that several teams have contacted the 49ers to discuss a trade for Deebo Samuel. And he makes it seem like trading him is still very much a viable option, and that there will be some market to trade him. It doesn't surprise me that much because, one, he's only 28. So if you're not really studying the player, you're like, hey, he's not old. And then 2, the Niners' offensive line is bad. So I think there's a lot of people who are like, hey, yeah, their line sucks, but if you get him behind our line, he might be pretty good. And then 3, I think there's a lot of people that look at Deebo and say, this guy was, high-profile player in a lot of big moments. So I don't know. And he's also, if you like what he does, there aren't anybody really like him. He's kind of a one of one, and there aren't that many guys. I mean, Laviska Shenault or a couple. There's a few guys that have that kind of dual running back wide receiver thing going. Cordero Patterson, a couple others, but not many. If you're Sean Payton, you want that joker, H back, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Who knows? Maybe he really wants Deebo, and I don't think he's going to fetch a ton, but I would say a 4th round pick might be possible, which is still a day 3 pick. But what do you think, John, as far as Deebo? Do you think ultimately they'll release him and they'll get nothing, or do you think you think they'll take the little bit of a cap hit that it's going to take to trade him?
I think he's going to get traded, and the only reason I think is it's all about leverage and supply and demand. And the reason why Brandon Ayuk there wasn't a lot of demand for him is because there was a lot of supply coming out of the college ranks, and there usually always is. But think about this from a standpoint of who got satisfied of the receivers. The Patriots still need a receiver. The Steelers still need a receiver. Cincinnati loses T. Higgins. They need a receiver. Cleveland still needs a receiver. I mean, we go on down the line. The Raiders need a receiver. There's tons of teams who need him. So the supply and demand right now before the draft, and then the draft comes in, but doesn't look like it's not a draft this year of Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. Like that receiver doesn't exist. So there's a lot. The Ravens always need a receiver. You can rail it off the top of your head. Double-digit amount of teams need a second receiver on their team this year. So is Deebo what he was? I don't know. There's certain teams like you just mentioned, because he's unique, who think, okay, he sheds those 20 pounds, and the side angle on the AJ Brown jersey at the Super Bowl did not look good. But Deebo has shown that. And to me, I don't know why I think this. I think last year of a contract, Deebo is going to be a motivated Deebo, and he's pissed off. So yeah, I think somebody's going to get him. And his cap number this year is 15.2. That's not small, but it's not out of this world massive. One of the reasons they can't keep him this year is because that's the highest amongst their receivers. Ayuk, for the big deal that he got, is at 11.2. Jennings just re-signed. Pearsall's a rookie. So I think what's going to happen in terms of Deebo is I think eventually they will get something for him. They can take the hit. This whole thing about hits anymore, cap hits, the Jets are going to eat a tasty 50 mil burger on Aaron Rodgers. that says two things. Number one, they can't stand Aaron Rodgers, which is the main part. But now with the cap being the way that it is, you can eat money like never before. You don't want to eat 50. I mean, Denver ate 50 and they went to the playoffs with Russell Wilson's money. Teams are going to eat money. So more than ever before, that's not as big of a factor as it's been in the past. If they can get a pick for Deebo Samuel and eat a little bit more money, the 49ers are going to do that. They've got the ability to do it, even signing Brock, even restructuring or redoing Kittle's deal and Warner's deal and all these different things, and wanting to keep some guys and add maybe a Dahlman on one side of the ball, like we said, maybe a Holland or whatever on the other side of the ball. They can get everything they need to get done and still take a hit on Deebo. And the other thing is, Krug, and you and I talk about this a ton, it always rears its ugly head. The fact that they traded all those picks for Trey Lance, they've got to get younger, cheaper players back on this team. They have got to balance the books here, because you have all these guys and you're going to add Brock to that list. Brock's going to make a ton. CMC top running back. Trent's getting paid. Fred's getting paid. Demo just got paid. Kittle's among the higher paid tight ends. You've got to even your books out in that way. And how do you do that? Okay, we'll take a hit from Debo, but we're going to get a 4th or a 5th round pick, which they've been 4th and 5th round picks for the Niners, pretty darn good in those mid rounds, and they know it. So they're going to do that. And then in terms of Ayuk, that situation is really interesting because it does depend on when he comes back. I don't know that they're going to draft somebody because you've already got a young guy in Pearsall. What they want to probably do is get somebody that can be kind of for a few games or a safety net. So is that like Amari Cooper? Like, Cooper's free and he didn't look good with the Bills.
Bad
yeah, he was terrible. So is there somebody out there that they can get cheap at the position? Because when Ayuk's back and they have Jennings and hopefully Pearsall's something and CMC's healthy and Kittle's Kittle, they don't need to go high end. Like, I've heard some people, I even saw some mock drafts by some people who said that showed that the Niners were going to take somebody in the first round. And I thought, they're not going. This Niners team is not. It's not Matt Millen and the Lions where they went 3 in a row. They're not going receiver in the first round. Again, they got too many other needs along the offensive and defensive lines or the edge. So I think what they're going to do with that is they're going to get somebody, a veteran, as a safety net, so that Ayuk doesn't have to rush back, and if he's not quite himself, or if Pearsall is not what they hope he is, then they can bring in a versatile receiver that can play a number of different positions.
It's interesting because, they've got unique weapons, and now they're getting rid of Debo, and it looks like, there's any number of ways you could replace him. I mean, you could, I'll give you a free agent that I kind of like for the Niners is Tommy Tremble from Carolina. He's a tight end, right? He's a Notre Dame tight end. He's kind of a receiver. But you could go double tight end and bring in, run a lot of 12 personnel early in the year. You could, another guy that I think would be a good fit for the Niners. He got hurt this last year, but I know Shanahan really likes him. Is Rondale Moore, who was in Arizona, but now he's got traded to Atlanta, and he got hurt this year. But Rondale Moore, coming out of Purdue a couple years ago, was running 4.29, and he's really kind of a combo running back, receiver. I mean, he's a big play guy. I could see him being a cheap free agent. And then there's also the possibility, it's a great running back draft. So what if you flexed out CMC? I mean, the guy's got Achilles problems. What if you flexed him out and used him as a receiver a little bit more and drafted a couple running backs that you really like? I mean, this is an awesome running back draft. There's that angle. And then, it's funny, Kittle saying, well, how are we going to replace him and, this and that. I don't like drafting a receiver. But I'll tell you, man, I spent some time this last couple of days doing the deep dive on Tetaroa McMillan, T-Mac for Arizona.
Yeah, he's
and
good.
This kid's from Hawaii,
6'5".
and he grew up in L.A. 6'5", he's 210. But he's got, this combine is going to be the T-Mac show, I think. I think he's going to have like a 44-inch vertical, and I think he's going to run sub 4.4. I think he's going to be like 4.37 or something like that at 6'5", 210. And the ball skills are freaking amazing. I mean, this guy attacks the football. He's got as good a ball skills as almost any receiver I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. So you got him. He's very, very special. And because when I'm hearing from some of my draft people who were at the in Mobile, a couple guys were like, hey, man, the hot rumor is that Jackson Dart's going to go in the top 10. And if Jackson Dart goes in the top 10, you know what? That pushes somebody down, and that somebody very easily might be T-Mac, Tetaroa, McMillan. I don't love the idea of a receiver, but I mean, if you really think he's spectacular, and if he runs 4.3 at 6'5", 210, and he's got these great ball skills, he's going to be intriguing. The other intriguing guy is Luther Burden from Missouri, and the more I watched him, the more I thought, Jesus, this guy can get to like top speed in like his third step. I mean, he's like 1 step, 2 step, full speed. I mean, it's crazy. He's a run after the catch. He's probably the best run after the catch receiver. Somebody compared him to Bolden, but he's way faster than Bolden. And I don't know. I mean, you could maybe trade back to 15, get an extra 3rd and 5th round pick or something like that for doing it. And
See, that's what I think.
Go with a Luther Burden. All I'm saying is I wouldn't be tied to any game plan because it's all about pick great players. The Lions have been picking great players. The Niners have been, looking for guys that fill needs, and it's Pearsall, it's this guy, it's that guy. We need a safety. We need this, we need that. Stop it. You need everything. You need great players. Detroit's getting great players. You need more great players. If Luther Burden, if they decide and their scouts say, you know what, Luther Burden's a star, or Tetaroa McMillan's a star, I would rather draft a star receiver than draft a defensive lineman, but he's just
that's
a
where
rotation player.
Krug, that's where they got in trouble with Kinlaw. They were just hell bent in that draft in replacing Buckner. Meanwhile, Tristan Wirfs was sitting right there. They trade back a pick, and they take Kinlaw, and Tampa takes Wirfs right in front of them with their pick. And what would they be doing right now? Like last offseason, if they had taken Wirfs instead and just taken the best player and not be so consumed with taking a replaceable player, even though he wasn't as good, then they could tell Trent Williams to go pound sand because, Tristan Wirfs would have been at right tackle. He'd have moved over to left tackle, and he said, okay, you've got to take best player. And I agree with you. McMillan's a total freak. I do wonder if someone would give them a lot to move up. So they're sitting at 11, and McMillan, for example, was a slider, and there's a team that needs receivers, and there's a lot of them, and they're going to give you something big for him. I could see them moving back. And again, you understand value more than anybody. When I saw Daniel Jeremiah the other day say that there are 24 starter grades on his defensive line when last year there were 12, even though I love Walter Nolan and I love the Grant kid from Michigan and Mason Graham, it goes without saying, and Mike Green's coming up boards, the kid. There's from Marshall, there's so many good defensive linemen and really elite ones. But if you can get one, at 11, they could get at 24, then get yourself some extra draft capital, like I said, and you've got to start building this team for the future and making sure those picks work. So, it's about value. It's about all those kind of things, because like you said, if McMillan's sitting there at 11 and somebody just absolutely loves it, because like you said, a 6'5" guy who can run that like that, he can go up. He's a great player at high point in the football. He's going to have a great combine. If someone falls in love with that guy and is willing to overpay at 11 because they just need a receiver so badly, then if I'm the Niners, that's what I do. Because you and I have talked about this a million times already. There's going to be a slider. There always is in that range. Jalen Carter 10, Parsons 12. Like that, it's weird. But there's always a slider in that range that you thought, I thought that guy was going top 5. I thought that guy was going top 3, and all of a sudden there's a slider because maybe there's a run on somebody, or maybe like you said, there's a shocking quarterback decision that somebody takes. So there's always a weird team in the middle of all that. Like a New Orleans always does weird stuff. So all of a sudden a weird guy gets taken, a guy slides, and either you stop the slide or you can take advantage of it. And so I saw the same things you have, just screwing around looking at mock drafts, where I saw a mock draft the other day that had McMillan going 21. Like there's no way.
A lot of people think he's going to run a slow 40. Some people think he's going to run a slow 40, but
now if he does that, maybe, but man,
yeah, I mean, if he runs a slow 40, he could slide. But I mean,
if he's a 4.4,
I'm hearing 4.3. That's what I mean. If he's that, somebody's coming up. But even if because of his size and abilities, even if he's running a mid to high 4.4, he's still fine. So I could see a team, because it's not a deep receiver draft. It's not an elite receiver draft. So if they're sitting at 11 and somebody's giving them a lot to move back and they can compile some picks, that's what I'd love for the 49ers to do, because what this regime has shown is if you give us a lot of darts at the dartboard, we're going to hit some of them. I don't want them to do less. Now, the only reason I'd want them to move up is if they, we've said this before, you and I, like Carter of Penn State or somebody really, really elite
Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. I don't know that they're going to go offensive tackle, but if you're the Niners, and this might be Trent's last year, you could stick Campbell at right tackle and then move him over to left tackle. So there's a lot of different things they could do, and 11's kind of a cool position to be in.
No doubt, no doubt, and we're so ahead of ourselves because all the information's not in. So
Right.
we don't even know exactly how these prospects stack up. It's funny, when I did sales, it was a really interesting study in how human beings view value, right? Because it's like, if you think about it, we view value based on the first price that we hear and compared to the price that we pay.
Totally.
Right?
Good call.
So, do you want to buy this condo? It's worth $1.5 million. Okay. I got it for $1.1 million. I got a screaming deal because it was $1.5 million condo that I got for $1.1 million. So a lot of people right now are looking at mock drafts and going, "Oh, wait a second. This guy can't go there," and it's all based on their mock drafts. But the mock drafts, we don't, as I said at the beginning, we don't have all the information yet. We don't know who runs the fastest. We don't know exactly how they work out. We don't have all the info. Like, I'm watching Tetaroa McMillan, and I did a half hour watching this guy. He has a huge catch radius.
Yep.
He has really rare ball skills. I saw him lined up in the on the perimeter. I saw him lined up in the slot. Then I wanted to find out, because I got all kinds of questions. Why is this guy at Arizona? I mean, no offense, Tommy, if you're watching, but Arizona is not the hotbed of football, right?
They weren't this year. The year before they were, but not this year.
Why is this guy at Arizona? And when I did the reading on the guy, he's born in Hawaii. He moved to LA. He played for a powerhouse team down in Southern Cal. His high school quarterback was Noah Fafita. Fafita went to Arizona and said, "Hey, bud, come to Arizona." Why? Because he made Fafita look like a monster in high school. And Fafita's like, "Dude, you got to come to Arizona." And Fafita, who I love in his own right, he's a tough little guy. And they made beautiful music together, right? I mean, seriously, Fafita to McMillan was amazing. But this guy's got this kind of, when the ball's in the air, Tetaroa McMillan has this "it's my ball" kind of a thing going, where I've seen him just rip the ball away from other people. He attacks the ball at the high point. He wants it. I mean, it's just, he's got great ball skills, but he wants it. And he's got a huge catch radius. He's got a volleyball background and a basketball background, so he's a major league leaper. And he goes way up, and Fafita threw it up to him in the red zone, and you can't get up to where this guy's going when he's 6'5", 210, and he's got 44-inch vert, and I think that's what he's going to test with. So once again, it always comes down to, what you think. If you've seen McMillan mocked in the 20s and the Niners take him at 11, you think they got screwed.
Yeah.
But if you saw him mocked in the top 3 and he goes 11, you're like, dude, it's value. And ultimately, you don't get confused with those things because, as I said, the information's not all in. But I did watch the other night, John. Mel Kiper and Field Yates had a thing called First Draft, and they were just going through it. And they got to the Niners at 11, and Field Yates gave the Niners Josh Simmons from Ohio State.
Right.
And then Kiper started talking about him. And Kiper's comments on him were, hey, this guy would have been a top 3 pick, except he got hurt this year, and that's why he's here at 11. So, that's pretty intriguing. And he was saying he's better than Paris Johnson, who's, I think, really damn good for Arizona.
Yeah.
Let's just say Simmons is a true top 5 blue chipper that was hurt this year, and if his injury checks out, maybe you go there. Maybe that's true value. It's like, so people, if you say Josh Simmons to Niner fans right now, well, they've been seeing him mocked anywhere from 7 to 27. So they're just like, I don't know, man, the 11th pick, really? Is he the best guy? But if you back away and then Kiper and Field Yates kind of reshape it as, this is the best offensive lineman in the draft who would have gone in the top 3, but for the injury this year, it changes your view of value when it comes to Simmons. So I don't know. It's interesting. There's all I would say to anybody is, how do you know what you know? Do you actually know these players, or are you just looking at mocks and you've seen a guy mocked in the like? I think Kenneth Grant is
I
really
love.
special.
I said that on my show the other day. He's my draft crush. He's
He's
330
amazing.
pounds, but he can move.
Yeah, he
You
might
know,
even be more. He might be closer to 350,
yeah,
and he can really move. And if you watched him against the Buckeyes in the Ohio State game, which is the most important game on his schedule, he played monster. I mean, he played
he can
huge in
play.
that game. And he can run, and he's not Mozzie Smith, who went to Dallas. He's way
No.
better. And he's 340 pounds. And to me, my view of the rebuild of this defense is big, dominant defensive linemen that absorb blockers and fast, small linebackers who can run and cover space. And to me, if you go for a Kenneth Grant and then, maybe get somebody else along the front line who's got some size, then in the mid rounds, there's all kinds of these small but fast and instinctive linebackers. David Benda, Chandler Martin, Demetrius Knight. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Eugene Asante. I mean, there's a ton of these guys that are really they're relatively small, John, but they're tackling machines, and they're they're captain of their team, and they're tough, and they're so I'm just saying, it's gonna be a lot of different ways to look at this, but like a lot of people look at Kenneth Grant. If the Niners took Kenneth Grant tomorrow was the draft, people be like, "Oh, you reached."
No,
and it's
no,
like, no. This guy's a blue chipper. He's 6'3", 340, 350, and he's super fast and tough and athletic and, wants it. This guy's going to change your whole defensive front. I mean, you're going to notice him on every play. He's going to
think Dexter Lawrence. I mean, that's
right.
That's the
exactly.
Ceiling. And the ceiling is that. Now, I'm not saying
exactly. He might be
I'm not
better.
going to say he's going to walk in, but he
might be better than Dexter Lawrence.
But if he got in and was that kind of an impact player,
huge.
I mean, that's what a lot of people are comping him to. Now, again, that's ceiling, but that's not a reach. But yeah, they're in a fun position. I mean, I just say that sitting at 11, someone's going to slip, or McMillan is a great call by you, where maybe somebody is desperate because there's a lot of teams that need receivers, and all of a sudden he comes up and you can get some more picks. I just want him to have a lot of shots at the dartboard. I think that trading down, but again, I'm not going to fall in love with something because every single day it's different. I've had my draft crush be Grant, Nolan, an offensive lineman. McMillan, you mentioned, is really interesting. They've got a lot of guys in that range that are going to be really good. I did one of these dorky things on Pro Football Focus, and then I showed everybody, I said, okay, we're at 11. These are the guys available. And so everybody was freaking out. And I go, I'm trading for Myles Garrett. Like everyone, oh, I know you can't do that. It's just, so they've got a lot of fun opportunities. But you mentioned this earlier. Let's just go back to what Tim said. It is such a critical draft and juncture for these guys, because not only do they got to hit in the first round, or if they trade or whatever the case may be, but I was looking just because I've done so many dumb Pro Football Focus mock drafts, no less than like 500, just over and over. I do them and just so that you know who's on the board, and it's not so much who the Niners are going to take, but who do you think is going to be in that range and all these kind of things. And their first round pick is interesting, but in the second round, you mentioned offensive line. It comes down to value. There is a ton of second and third round offensive linemen value-wise in this draft, so I don't think the Niners would go there. Receivers are going to go off fast, so only they know where Brandon Ayuk is in his recovery process and really how much they believe in Ricky Pearsall. They are the only ones who know, like, is this it for Trent Williams? Because I just get the sense that it is. So you got to bring somebody in, because when you're talking left tackle to protect your Brock Purdy, who you're just going to have given a massive contract to, a lot of times you got to be like in the top 10, right? Remember a few years ago when like Cross came out and all these different guys, like if you're a good offensive tackle, well, we saw it in this last draft. The Saints took one early, right? Alt goes to the Chargers. They had
Fuaga.
Yeah, Fuaga went to the Saints. The Jets took one. I mean, all of a sudden you're looking like
that guy didn't play. Fashanu. I mean,
till the end of the year. But if you think there's an elite left tackle on the board, you've got to take one. And so they're in that same range where those guys go in like the 12 to 15 range. And we always forget about it because offensive linemen are like socks and underwear. It's like you don't want to spend your draft picks on them, but you have to. Man, I just, you're not going to walk around free balling. You're not going to walk around with no socks on. Like, you've got to take these guys. It's just part of the deal. And when you're talking about Brock Purdy, and there's enough skill position on this team to be okay, you can't have pressure up the middle with them. So you and I have talked about this a million times, center and guard. And I don't know how long Trent Williams is going to play. He doesn't have to play anymore. He has plenty of money. And really the only reason Trent is playing is because the Niners are in a championship window. I think the minute Trent Williams thinks these guys aren't going to get it done, then he's out. And then what? Like, seriously, the biggest need might be left tackle on the entire team, only because if Trent's done after this year, who's next? Jalen Moore's a free agent too, and I'm not even a huge fan of his, but he's improved a lot. I'll give him that.
He has.
But where are you going? Like, who's protecting?
I hope they can re-sign him because they need him. They need him bad.
So anyway, when you're in, I guess my point is when you're in this range, that's where elite tackles go. And then as you go longer in the draft, it's hard as hell to find an elite quality left tackle. Like, you can find guards, you can find centers, you can find mauling right tackles, but finding a dancing bear left tackle that can protect your, $50 to $60 million investment, I don't think enough people are talking about. This is probably it for Trent Williams this year. So then what do you do? What are you doing after that?
You have to figure out the tackle spot, because the reality is, and you don't think you're ever going to pick up this high again. So
you don't want to be,
at least you don't want to be, and Trent's key. But the other thing also is, sometimes offensive linemen take a couple of years to develop, and it's like, do the Niners want to go get some blue chip offensive linemen that takes 3 years to develop? But 3 years from now, Bosa's old,
look at Kansas City, right?
Kittle's old.
They take the kid out of BYU early in the season. They think that he's going to Kingsley, whatever his name is, and they think that he's going to be able to hold the left side on Mahomes' blind side. He's getting his ass kicked.
Well, did you see the numbers on him?
He got smoked.
Did you see that? I almost put this out the other day. He finished. There were people in. He had that early start. And people were like, "Oh, the Niners blew it. They didn't draft Kingsley Sumatea, whatever." And he is the lowest rated offensive tackle in the league. The lowest rated in the entire league. So it takes time, man.
They had a vet after him. He gets hurt. And then they kicked Tooney out there. And people are like, God, how did the Eagles win the Super Bowl so decidedly? Because Joe Tooney was playing left tackle, and he was their third tackle of the year. Now, I'm not saying that was exactly why. I mean, there was a pick six, and there was a million things. But the reason Mahomes was running around with like a chicken with his head cut off is because your offensive line starts. I know it starts inside, but you better have a left tackle, or you know what happens all day long is the best rusher from the other team. Bosa's over you, Crosby's over you, Garrett's over you. Like, they can play either side of the line, and if you got a weak link on the outside on one of your flanks, especially at left tackle on the blind side, you're dead. I mean, just dead. And Tooney's a great guard, but he couldn't keep any of those Eagles out of there. So all of a sudden, Mahomes is thinking to himself, damn, I got to have eyes in the back of my head. And that's really where it all started in the Super Bowl is Mahomes started, he was Sam Darnold seeing ghosts, because he's like, Tooney can't protect my blind side. I'm dead. So anyway, I'm going on a rant about.
No. I mean, you're totally right. I mean, I was
talking about Trent's 38 years old. I mean, they better do something about it.
They better do something. I mean, here's the thing, too, on the Eagles, just to add to what you were saying about the Eagles. 10 teams, I should say teams that won the Super Bowl and conference championship by at least 18 points or more in the same NFL postseason. 84 Niners, 85 Bears, 89 Niners, and this year's Eagles. So
they were dominant.
We saw them dominate the two biggest games of the season, and nobody really dominated like the Eagles dominated. And they're really young. They're really talented. They got a young head coach. They got a young general manager. They ain't going anywhere. So it's going to be a real challenge for the 49ers. We got this one from Anthony Blakely. He says the 49ers already replaced Debo with Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. My question would be this. Let's just say the Niners go into the offseason and they do exactly what everybody wants them to do. They get a good O-line. They draft the right O-lineman, and he plays well. They draft a couple key D linemen somewhere on the way, and they play well. And they bolster both their offensive line and defensive line. To me, if that's all they do, I still think they're cooked, because you're not winning the Super Bowl with Ayuk off this injury, JJ, Pearsall, and Cowing. You're just not. I don't know what receiver you have to get. It's not my job to go get a receiver, but I can tell you what isn't good enough, and that's not good enough. You need more another dynamic receiver, somebody who can stretch the field, somebody who can scare somebody. JJ runs in the 4.7s. Pearsall, who knows? Cowing, I expect Pearsall and Cowing to be better, but You take away Debo and Ayuk, because that's essentially what's going to happen. I don't think Ayuk's coming back before November. So you don't have Ayuk, you don't have Debo, and you're going to lean on 2 second-year receivers that haven't done a whole lot. JJ, who runs 4.7. It's just like, hey, you better find a receiver. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I realize I don't want to draft one in the first round either. I'd rather go in a different direction than draft a receiver, but you better find a receiver. You better trade for one, find one, draft one, sign one, and you better be a good one, because that you probably have the worst receiving core of any team in the Super Bowl hunt. The other thing I wanted to show you here, I've got a stat here that's unbelievable that I saw today, and I made it my 49ers stat of the day. Here, this is a stunning fact. The 49ers offense this year converted under 48% of their third and short situations. It's defined as 2 yards or less.
Yeah.
48% they converted of their third and shorts into firsts.
That is such a ridiculous number.
Only the Browns performed worse in this situation. So, you know what? I got to say to the Niners, stop gaslighting us with the, you talk to Forrester, he says Brendel's great. You talk to Kyle, he says Juszczyk's great. Juszczyk's a Pro Bowl fullback. I'm seeing him partying at the Pro Bowl. If you have a great center and a Pro Bowl fullback, you can run the ball in short yardage. If you have a great center and a Pro Bowl fullback and Christian McCaffrey and J.P. Mason, who is leading the league in rushing, you shouldn't be second worst in the league in third and short to the Browns. The reality is Banks got his ass kicked this year. I don't know why, but he did. And he got worked. I mean, Carl Brooks in the Green Bay game is Green Bay's backup defensive tackle. He worked Banks. He beat him with strength. He beat him with quickness. So Banks was getting beat to the spot repeatedly, not quick enough. And I love Aaron Banks. I mean, he's a great dude. I love talking to him. But he wasn't quick enough. He regressed. I'm not sure what happened there. Pooney regressed as the season went on. He's a rookie. Brendel was, according to PFF, one of the worst centers in all of football. Juice, what would you say you do here? Outside of your girlfriend or wife or whatever making jackets, I mean, what do you do? What do you actually do? I like the jackets, bro, but I'd rather run inside the 5. And so I don't know who you want to blame, but somebody's got to be blamed there. When you're second worst in the NFL on third and short situations, either your center's not getting it done, your fullback's not getting it done, your guard's not getting it done, your running back's not getting it done. It's that's it. That's kind of like all the people that are connected to this equation. So I don't know what the plan is going to be, but I can't go into another training camp where Chris Forster tells me that Brendel's, better in 7 different categories than every other center. And, we keep celebrating this Pro Bowl fullback, except you can't run the ball in short yardage and you can't run the ball on the goal line. I mean, it's like, dude, stop gaslighting us. Replace some of these guys. Let's stop telling us that it's, you're urinating on me and you're telling me it's raining. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it anymore. And
I love when you get on these tangents.
It just drives me crazy.
Well, because here's the thing.
I went off in the middle of the year last year, John, because seriously, I'm talking to Sorensen on a Thursday and he's like, Devondre Campbell's a hell of a guy. He's really looking good. I'm talking to Forster. Jake Brendel is 7 times better than every other center that I can think of. This guy was a Pro Bowler.
Do they think we don't watch at all? I'm not saying I know more football than Nick Sorensen, but dude, when you say that at major points of the season that Campbell,
he's a hell of a guy.
Other teams knew him only because they always saw the back of his jersey chasing guys, especially on routes out of the backfield. It was like, dude, Campbell 59. There's Campbell 59. Like, my God, and you're going to tell us he's good?
Dude, Sorensen tried to tell us that missed tackles are a good stat because it shows that you're in the neighborhood. And we have the kind of defense where guys really fly to the football. So there's going to be a lot of missed tackles. And it's like,
not.
Dude, stop it.
Patrick Willis flew to the ball, and so did Navarro Bowman. They didn't miss tackles. I mean, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
I mean, tell your fans in Dallas all about that.
Let me go back to your 3rd and 2 thing, just because the numbers that they had, and everyone wants to equate it and just go, well, McCaffrey's going to fix it. McCaffrey's going to fix it. Okay, 3rd and 2, like you said, they were terrible. 3rd downs in general, they were terrible, both on offense and defense. And red zone, both offense, defense, they were terrible. You don't even have to look at other numbers. Those numbers are so key of what you just pointed out that if you just look at those 3rd downs, red zones, 3rd and shorts, that's going to tell you what your entire season is. A Kyle Shanahan team on 3rd and 2 should never second to last, which tells you, like you said, Banks stinks. Brendel's on his back all the time, stinks. You didn't have a plan, and you just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. Only some of it can be, okay, Christian McCaffrey. I get it, man. He's awesome. He was what Barkley is last year. But still, Jordan Mason is a north-south runner. He can do that. I get it. The Guerrero is not quite there. We overrate sometimes the back because a lot of these backs can do this. Short yardage is an art. There's no doubt about it. Marcus Allen near the goal line, certain guys like that could just get in the goal. They just knew how to do it, slither and slide. And they had a knack. But there's no way that an offense designed by Kyle Shanahan, it can be that inept unless the players are that bad. And Banks was never a fit here. He couldn't move for the zone system. He was too big. And I like Banks. He's a Bay Area guy. You and I had him on right after the draft. He was excited to be drafted by the Niners. I like the kid. But, Joshua Garnett and him are basically the same thing. Brendel's on his back all the time. Quit telling us players can play. We can not only watch the game, we go back and watch the game. And if you're in this business, you go back and you watch the all-22. And it's just like, God, if the guy's on his back, Chris Forster, I'm dumb, but he can't block on his ass. He just can't. And no center in football was on his ass more than what Brendel was. He can't block from there. He doesn't have leverage when he's laying on his back and his ass is on the ground and he's getting trampled. So on 3rd and 2, you can tell me how great these guys are, but the backs aren't bad backs. And the play calls are not bad play calls. So something else has got to be going wrong. And when I go back and watch the film as an amateur, I'm seeing guys get blown up. And I don't know. I'm just going to do a little math and say, that's the problem. Even I can see that. It's a problem. So whether it's Dahlman, there's a number of centers in this draft that are pretty good. You mentioned the kid in Montana State. Georgia's got a nice
Marcus
SC,
Ware.
Ohio State.
Marcus Ware, I should say.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 good centers. But what I mean by that is, and you don't love having rookie centers because, they got to make the line calls and all this, and you got a young guy. But certain guys, Creed Humphreys come in and did it. Linderbaum's did it with Baltimore. There's been a number of guys. What you need is a pivot man nowadays that's 6'4" and 315, 320. Brendel might be 290, 295. You're not big enough to handle the athleticism, the size, the strength, the quickness, the explosiveness of the type of tackles that are in this league week after week after week. You can't handle Carter of the Eagles. You can't handle the Rams front. You cannot handle the Lions have upgraded in the middle. You can't keep these guys off your quarterback especially when you have a quarterback who can't really see over the line anyway. So if you're playing the Niners and they're weak inside and you're getting middle penetration on a Brock Purdy, he's going to say what he said against the Rams when he threw the ball down the sidelines into bracket coverage. I didn't even see the throw because he was getting middle pressure and he just decided, I think Jawan Jennings is either going to knock it away or he's going to be there because I got to trust him. So that was a major problem. You can't run, you can't throw, your quarterback can't see. We're talking about all the issues that they have, but whether it's 1A, 1B, or whether you want to go D-line, and I get it, we just talked about safety and all these different things, but if they can't fix, because 3rd downs and 3rd and shorts were such a big deal and red zone was such a big deal, red zone, the field gets condensed. You've got to execute at a really high level, and they don't have guys that can do that, especially inside. And so when Forster tells you that those guys are playing well, that's just not true.
Well,
it's not true.
It's like, Chris, I love you, brother, but guess what? Chris Jones kicked your guy's ass.
Bad.
And guess what? Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, and Mekhi Becton kicked his ass.
Right. So, I mean, you can look at that.
So, and I know the Niners have gone for smaller, more athletic linemen, but it is time to start to get with the trends. Look at Philly's line. It was big. It was physical. Look at Baltimore. You know who the All-Pro tight end was this year? Wasn't it in the AFC? Wasn't it Ricard? I believe. I think he made the Pro Bowl as a tight end.
Yeah, he was
fullback.
I'd like.
It was Ricard. He was an offensive lineman, And if I would definitely say goodbye to Juice.
Yeah.
There's a guard from North Carolina in this draft that I just absolutely love. I mean, seriously.
The 5'10" or 5'11" kid.
Yeah, he's 5'10".
Yeah, he's got to become a fullback. He cannot.
Why do I always forget this
He
guy's
cannot
name?
play guard. He was at
I
the Senior
love
Bowl
this
kicking
guy.
everybody's ass at like 5'10", and he wears like number 55 or something.
Yeah, he's just
And this
badass.
kid was just,
it's just
he was mashing
unbelievable.
people at like 5'10", and it's like, okay, dude, you're not playing guard at 5'10" in the NFL, but you want to play
But
like
maybe center.
But I'm saying, like,
I mean,
he's
his
like
okay.
5'10", 285. Like, dude,
Willie
that's Patrick
Lampkin.
Ricard. Yeah, what's
Willie
his height?
Lampkin
Like, isn't
is
he
his
like
name.
5'10", 285 or something like that.
How many picks are there in the draft?
Well, Brock was 262, so something in that range, right?
Okay, so this guy is
a
listed.
couple more comp picks.
This guy's listed as I'm looking at Draft Tech, which is a good website. He's listed as the 15th best guard in the draft, right? He's listed at number 261 overall. So he's thought to be a late 7th round pick, right? Willie Lampkin from North Carolina. Get that guy and let him back up your center if he's not good enough to start. But use that guy as your fullback. Say goodbye to Juice. Juice is like 240. This guy's 270 on a 5'10" frame. This guy's also like a championship, like 67-0 wrestler.
All right.
This guy's a dominating wrestler. He's a badass. This guy was throwing down defensive linemen in the one-on-one drills in Mobile, like throwing them down into the turf. And just like stepping over. I mean, he's just a beast. He's nasty. He's strong. He's looking to kill people.
I'd like him to be a fullback, man. I mean,
go
he's
get
like
Willie
5'10",
Lampkin as your
280
fullback and tell Juice to go get a jacket.
Let me ask you. I got to ask you this since you're bringing up Juice. So Kittle, I don't know if you saw this video. Kittle brings everyone down to Cabo. I think they're all in Cabo.
Right,
all these Niners doing all this stuff. And the funniest part of the whole thing, and maybe I'm just totally overdoing this, but you can hear
matching outfits.
They're all in like, they're all in a knee and they're taking a picture on the beach. So Trent's there and Kyle's there and not Kyle Juszczyk's there and George Kittle. There's all
was
these
Kyle
Niners.
Shanahan taking the picture?
I don't know. I no, it was Claire Kittle, and the only reason I know it was Claire Kittle was there's like 20 guys all lined up, and she goes, "Okay, say go Niners." And you could look right at Juice and so there's 20 guys. So if they really want to say go Niners, it'd be like this big thing. And they all kind of grumbled it. But like Kittle did, because it was his wife saying it. But like Juice didn't say it. Like, and they all kind of went, go Niners.
Some of those guys are free agents.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Some are free agents.
Saubert was there. He's a free agent.
I think Juszczyk took a pay cut down to like 3.5 last year, which, all of us would be jumping up and down for. But I don't think he is going to come back. This goes back to, again, the original premise that we started the show with that you talked about with Tim's comments, Kawakami's comments. Look, he's a nice guy and the jackets are cool and he went to Harvard and he's very smart and, you can have him talk to the media and he knows all these things. But like you said, remember the game where it was like, okay, we're out of running backs. So let's have Juice carry the ball, which was a dumb philosophy. And then he fumbles. Like, okay, right. He can't run it. He's not a great blocker. He's wide open in the run game, in the pass game, and they still don't throw it to him. Like he's down the sideline, like waving his hands. They still don't throw it to him. Like you said. So what do you say you do here? Right. If you're terrible on 3rd and 2 and Juice is your fullback, part of it's his problem, part of it's the center, part of it's the guard. But like the Ravens have had a hammer type of a fullback, and not many teams have them, but they've had Patrick Ricard forever. Before that, they had, they were big into fullbacks. Like, go get yourself a hammer fullback, fixed center and guard, and all of a sudden 3rd and 2, like that's a massive down. 3rd and 3, 3rd and short, the type of things. The Niners should never be one of the worst teams in the league in 3rd and short when they have Kyle. And that goes back to Debo too. It's like, oh, Debo's in the backfield. I wonder who's going to get the ball. Like everyone's figured Debo out the backfield. So there is no creativity to the run game. And so what that does is it comes down to, can the line or can the blocking execute it? And more times than that, they can't.
Yeah. And the Niners, we're talking about adding a fullback. They actually adding a center. They actually lost a center today. John Feliciano retired, though he did say that he'll come back in December for Buffalo or the Niners if they need him. But veteran offensive lineman, he announced his retirement after 9 seasons, played
Great
for the Raiders,
guy, by the way.
Bills,
We're
Giants,
at the Super Bowl, like the funniest
guy.
interview we did, and you know how this works. So all the star guys are at those podiums getting asked dumb questions, and a million people around them. And then there's guys like Feliciano, who is great floating around, or Chris Conley, or these veteran guys who you can get 6 or 8 minutes with on one-on-ones, and they're just like Feliciano knows the game. I mean, he is so smart.
Dude, he was like homeless as a child, and he like his story of what the odds that he beat to make it are really amazing. Not only that, so I'm doing an interview of Dom Pooney early in the year, right? And Feliciano locker's like 5 lockers down. Feliciano's the old head in the room, and Pooney's the rook. And I'm doing the interview with Pooney. I'm standing, but he was sitting. And Feliciano walks in for practice, and he goes, "Hey, Rook, stand up for the interview." And
he says
and then
that.
Yeah, and you can hear it. And I'm like, "Oh man, Big John has spoken, man." And
Did he stand up?
And he stood up. He stood up. I mean, this guy, Pooney's like, 320 pounds himself, and kind of a tough guy in his own right. But you know what?
He brings up a good point, though. I'm trying to think.
Stand up, Rook. We don't do interviews sitting down. Stand up.
That's true.
Awesome.
That's true. Most guys do stand. Like I can't think of a guy who doesn't stand up. Now that I think about it,
sometimes guys will sit if they're shy, or if they're sitting in their locker, or they really why they want to sit is because they don't want to announce to the rest of the media corps that they're talking.
Then we're a bunch of sheep, and we'll run over. Like if somebody has the balls to ask somebody if they'll talk, and they do, and then you start talking to them, and all of a sudden here comes 20 friends around you behind you, and you're like, "Come on, bro."
Dude, you know how many times I've interviewed guys, and I'm like, "Hey man, you got a minute?" And you're like, "Yeah, no problem, Krueg, let's talk." And then all of a sudden, I'm talking to Colt McKivitz or something like that,
right.
And then all of a sudden, after like the 5th question, over my left shoulder, I can see the light going on.
Yeah,
when the light goes on over your shoulder, that
then
means the TV donkeys who are too gutless to ever go up to these guys themselves are piggybacking your interview because they don't have the balls to actually ask somebody, hey, buddy, you got 5 minutes? It's like, that's too dangerous. So they'll wait for Krueger to ask them, and then they'll just try to piggyback it at the end. And then usually what I'll do is I'll be like, I'll apologize. I'll be like, "Thanks, Colton. Sorry for bringing the horde here."
Yeah, because then they got to stand there for 10 minutes.
No problem, buddy. No problem. And then he'll walk, but that kind of stuff. But whatever. I mean, it is what it is.
But you bring up a good point, because you get really good stuff, like our smile microphones, or we'll put out our phones or something, then they're fine with it. You start getting TV cameras around, and then guys don't want to say anything. And so now all of a sudden, the things you were getting that were good, done. Like that stuff's over, because they know, no, the TV camera's here. If I say something, I'm going to get in trouble or something.
Exactly. I'm having a conversation with Colton McKivitz one day about his pregame meal. I'm like, "Let's talk about your pregame meal." And he's like, "It's 2 porterhouses and a bowl full of buttered noodles." And so I go,
"What?"
I go, "Yeah, that's what he eats before."
That's what he eats before. Like I'd be vomiting
before the game. 2 porterhouse steaks and a big bowl of buttered noodles. That's his pregame.
Dude.
Now he doesn't eat it 30 minutes before the game. He probably eats it 4 hours before the game or something like that. So he's probably digesting.
Porterhouses.
2 porterhouses, big.
I thought you were going to say like raccoon or something. You remember his dad had the raccoon hat and all that. I thought he was going to say that.
I asked him about that too.
By the way, not to get you on a tangent.
Yeah,
we got to play this at some point during the show or something, or in the next couple of days. I had forgotten about this. I remember, and then I forgot who the player was in it. And today, because they're playing highlights from the funniest moments or whatever from the combine. Ben Barch was the guy who did like the scrambled egg, Gatorade, like all that
6
smoothie.
eggs. Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was the guy. And then today they reposted it, like the NFL reposted it. Funny moments from the combine.
Dude, he put on like 40 pounds or something.
Disgusting. It was it was the most disgusting. He's putting like 3 flavors of a Gatorade scrambled, not like egg whites or not like uncooked eggs, which you can grind into a smoothie, whatever, for protein. He scrambles the eggs up and he puts them in the smoothie like that. I was just like, "Oh my God." And it was Ben Barch, who was with the Niners, and I had forgotten that he had done that, but it was just, it's like,
Barch,
bro,
Barch is the man.
With that? It was
Barch
terrible.
Is the man. He's a really cool guy. It's funny. He'd only been on the team for like 3 weeks, right? And I'm walking by him one day, and I gave him the head bob. "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Hey, what's going on, Krueg?" I'm like, I don't think I've ever talked to that guy before. He knows my name. So then I walk over there. I go, "Hey man, how did you know my name?" And he's like, "I've seen your show. I watch it sometimes. I like watching YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube."
You
I'm
forget
like,
the younger guys. That's what they do.
it made me laugh, and I'm like, oh, cool. So we start chatting it up, and I've asked him about that concoction a few times, and it's pretty funny. It's also funny
So nasty.
when Jung-Hoo Lee did an interview with the Giants beat writers when he first got introduced. They're like, Jung-Hoo, what do you like to do when you're not playing baseball?
The hard-hitting question.
Yes, typical giant media corps. I think I'm on the team, but I actually work for the Athletic. Anyway, so there, Jung-Hoo. What do you do for fun when you're not playing baseball? And what he spit out, because you got to remember this, he doesn't speak English,
Right.
so it has to go through an interpreter, and then he answers, and then it's got to come back through the interpreter. So the question gets asked to him from the interpreter, then he starts laughing, then he says something, then the interpreter starts laughing, and now we're about to find out what he said. And I'm sitting there, and all these people are like, got their notebooks, and they're about ready to write it down. It's really important. This is so vitally important.
Yeah, it's got to be great.
I loved it, John. He goes, I like to watch YouTube and eat good food made by my mother.
That was it.
That was his answer.
They're waiting for a scoop like that.
They were waiting for, like, I like to read books. I like to mountain bike ride.
Yeah.
I like to watch YouTube. But the look on the faces of these media people when they heard that he likes to watch YouTube was just
generation.
Like, it was just.
I mean, that's what
awesome.
they do.
It was a classic clip.
Well, plus, here's the thing too. You're a baseball player, right? What do you like to do when you're not playing baseball? 9 months of the year, I play baseball, and that's pretty much what I do. And I sit in a hotel room, and like you said, YouTube's on or something. Like, I'm a baseball player. I play baseball. I go to a different town. I sleep a lot. I probably play video games. Like, that's, that's 9 months a year. That's what I do. And then the other 3 months, I don't want to talk to you at all. Like, I don't want to tell you what I do.
Exactly. Don't ask and go away.
Yeah, right.
All right. A couple last thoughts here. One, what was the one I wanted to get to here? Oh, well, we've been referencing the salary cap a bunch.
Yeah.
The NFL has informed teams that the 2025 per team salary cap is going to be in the range of $277.5 million to $281.5 million, way up from last year's $255.4 million. This came out this week. I think most people expected the cap to go up $20 million. So most people thought it was going from 255 to 275, and that was the estimation. It's now going to be between 277 and 281. So it went up a little bit more. The other note from today I thought was kind of interesting. According to a guy named one of the writers I read, I think his last name's Okada, he expects Yatir Gross-Matos to wind up being a cap casualty. And of course, Javon Hargrave is also on that list. Maybe Leonard Floyd will be on that list. Maybe he won't. We'll find out. But according to reports, Yatir Gross-Matos is going to be a cap casualty. And also Kyle Shanahan, who typically skips the combine, is expected to join John Lynch and Tariq Ahmad and R.J. Gillen and the Niners contingent next week during the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, according to Matt Barrows. What do you think, John? Is this a significant thing that Shanahan's going to the Combine? He skipped it a bunch, but, I mean, they got to get this thing right this year. That's for damn sure. What do you think of Shanahan going to the Combine?
He's got to go. They're picking at 11. And even if you're not a fan of the Underwear Olympics or whatever the case may be, the big part for somebody like Kyle Shanahan, who has instincts, I think, as a head coach of who he wants on his team, is the interview part. Like, you got to talk to these guys, and you got to get as much information as you can, because the one thing is that, you make mistakes. And here's the other thing, too. Not that Jed York gets involved. I think the best thing Jed has done is, hey, I know what I don't know, so you guys do it. But I don't know. Here's a suggestion if I own the Niners. You guys crush it rounds 2 through 7. Congratulations. In the first round, you picked Brandon Ayuk, which may or may not have been a good idea to give him a second contract. My thought on success in the first round is if you get to a second contract. So McGlinchey was taken 9th. I don't consider that successful because he didn't get to a second contract with the Niners. So the only guys who have in their tenure here is Ayuk, which is questionable, and Bosa, which was obvious. So in the 2nd through 7th rounds, you've done well. If I'm Jed York, hey, Kyle, what else do you got to do? Like, you're going to be in Cabo? You working out? You got parent-teacher conferences? Like, what are you doing that you wouldn't go to Indianapolis? You got to go to Indianapolis. And I don't care if you're not impressed by the 40 or all these different things. you know what you want in a player, and especially offensively. So is a guy a Kyle Shanahan guy? Because at the end of the day, that's your baby. And the reason why you brought in Sala and all these different in a new special teams coach in Boyer, who has all this experience, they're going to be able to tell you what their guy is. But you better go find out who your guys are. You want some dogs in the trenches, you better go find it, because I guarantee you this, and you know this. I know Nick Sirianni's there, and I know Howie Roseman's together, and I know those two guys are getting together going, you like these guys? I know Dan Campbell's there, along with Brad Holmes. They go and they commiserate and say, what are we doing? What do you like these guys? Like, you and John Lynch and the rest of the guys have got to be in these meetings and then right away say, what do you think? Is this guy a Niner? Because we talk about this all. There is a certain type of player that the Niners want to have on your team, and this is why mock drafts miss, is because they look at a team, they need this position. Here's the best player on my board. I'm going to do my mock draft and stick that player in there. Well, that doesn't mean that he's the type of player that the Niners want to have just because he happens to play that position of need when their pick comes up. That's why there's surprises all the time. You've been a scout before. What is a 49er player, right? Well, they love the game. They play hard. They're hard-nosed. Well, how does Kyle find that out from wherever he is not being at the combine? So when I hear every year that he's not going to go, and now you have pick 11, so it's like you damn better well go, I see most teams, head coaches and general manager and front office guys there. So why wouldn't you go? Like, what else you doing that's more important than fortifying your team for the future? I find that to be kind of important.
I mean, it's essential. I mean, I don't know if it's essential as far as, I don't know that he needs to make every pick, but it's essential that they get this right. And if he hasn't gone in the past, then maybe he should go. Let's just take a walk down memory lane here. 2017, they draft Joe Williams in the 4th because Kyle wanted him. Doesn't make the team. They traded up in the 3rd round to get C.J. Beathard because Kyle wanted him.
That was a terrible pick.
2018, they traded up in the 2nd round to get Dante Pettis because Kyle wanted him. In 2019, I believe they traded up in the 3rd round to get Jalen Hurd because Kyle wanted him.
Yeah.
Ayuk obviously worked out the next year, but we all know in 2021, Kyle wanted Trey Lance. They drafted Trey Sermon in the 3rd round. These are offensive players that I'm sure Kyle probably had an opinion on. They're all bombs. 2022, TDP, Danny Gray, Spencer Burford, two in the 3rd and 4th round. That doesn't look good. Those are all offensive players. The Jake Moody pick looks terrible. The Cam Latu pick.
He definitely didn't want Moody. I know that
he didn't want
fact,
Moody, but
he
Cam
walked in
Latu
right away. Yeah.
Cam Latu, he's a tight end in your offense. The guy was so limited he couldn't get it done. So, I'm just saying
I've never gone over it from
players.
Offense. Yeah, offense isn't good. And here's the thing. I know it's everybody coming together, but when it comes to the 49ers, and Kyle has final say. So when something goes wrong, it's on Kyle. We know for a fact that he handpicked Trey Lance. But also, like you just mentioned, a boatload of offensive players. And they've had great success. They have the Kittles and they have all these things success-wise. But Kyle Shanahan can reject a player, can say, I don't want that guy, especially offensively. I know he didn't want Moody because he walked into the room that day, and the first thing he said when he opened the door was, I wanted a running back, and we all just started laughing. But he does rubber stamp offensive players. And if they're not coming through, if they're not getting the right kind of offensive players, then that's on Kyle. Now, I know Forrester on the offensive line. I know there's certain position groups and coaches who have more say in that room, but everybody looks at Kyle and says, what do you think, Kyle? And he can reject them. He can, he doesn't do it often because he wants to be part of the group, but I can guarantee you certain positions, receiver, because he played it. We know that. Running back, as you said, he's made a lot of calls. Skill position players, Kyle makes a lot of choices on final decisions, rubber stamping choices. And as you said, they've had some problems, the backfield, obviously, but they've had some problems in those places. Now, look, before Debo and before Ayuk, they had problems picking receivers. Say what you want about Debo. He was successful here. Whatever his future lies ahead for him, he and Kyle were on the same page, and Ayuk looks like if he can come back from this injury, he's been successful. Those are successful picks, but it's moving forward now, and this is where I get nervous in the 1st round. Moving forward now, they've got to hit like the Rams hit, like the Eagles hit, like the Lions hit. It's not like, hey, in 2022, we got Brock, awesome, and everybody else sucked. Like when you are in a window for a long time, you hit 2, 3, 4 drafts in a row, and you hit 2, 3, 4 players in those drafts. It's not just one and done or a first rounder or whatever. And they've done it before, but the charge on them right now to stay in this window is they've got to hit, two, like last year is a successful draft. Absolutely. Okay, successful draft. Next year, successful draft. Another one, successful. And then you start looking at those teams, you go, wow, look at those 3 years in a row that they nailed the draft. They're really good. That's the Eagles, the Lions, the Rams, the Packers. That's what all these teams, if you look at their track record over the last few years, they've gotten those key free agents. I mean, to look back and say Philly got Baum and Barkley in one offseason, in addition to the 2 DBs they drafted, and Jalen Carter the year before, Howie Roseman is doing serious work. But they're doing the majority of the work through the draft, and they're hitting 2, 3 drafts in a row.
And the standard's got to be much higher than their standard. Their standard is like, let's find a good player at a position of need. Screw that. The Lions are drafting great players. Go find great players. That's what you really need to do. Go find great players. Go find Brian Branch. I understand Aiden Hutchinson, Penei Sewell. Those guys are top 10 picks. They kind of pick themselves, kind of the way Nick Bosa picked himself. But you got to hit. I mean, the Lions are drafting great players. Great.
And that fit. And that's where I guess I go back to Kyle, and your original question is, you've got to try to gather as much information as you possibly can. And I get it that maybe he doesn't like it, or maybe he's grinding film, or whatever the case is, but you got to be around a guy. I mean, that's just how I look at it. And you and I talk about the draft all the time. It's 50-50 in the first round, and it goes down from there. And so in order to not get fooled by somebody, you got to go talk to them, and you got to see how much they love football, and you got to see if they're going to fit in your locker room. And chemistry is a big part of everything. It's the whole reason that Kittle and Warner played out last year when they didn't have to, was because they wanted to be leaders on this team and say, guys, it doesn't matter how bad it looks. We're not quitting. Now, I understand why Trent Williams hit his thing down. He's 36, 37 years old. He doesn't need to take physical hits. He doesn't practice sometimes during the week. He doesn't like being in training camp. He understands how his body works, and that's fine. But you've got to find those guys, the Warners. Warner played safety at BYU, man. I watched a ton of BYU film. I never saw Fred Warner being what he's being, or George Kittle being a 5th rounder. Well, how do you draft those guys if you're the Niners? You're around Kittle, and you see Kittle's love for the game. You're around him all the time. Like
there's no shortcuts.
Right.
You can't shortcut it.
When you're around Warner, when you're around Kittle, like we have been over the last number of years, the majority of their career, you understand why they're as good as they are, because you talk to them and you see it and you understand it. So Kyle's got to go to the combine, not because they're running around in underwear and their Under Armour stuff. I don't care about any of that. He can watch film, and he can go back and look at the stuff from the combine. Their guys are filming it. You got to talk to these guys as much and get in front of them as much as you possibly can. And then talk to the coaches, talk to, this, that, and the other. And maybe you still miss on these guys. I get it. But you got to get around them. Like, I hate.
You got to get a feel for it. You got to get a feel for who you're drafting. I talked to Ned Coletti, who was the GM of the Dodgers for a while, and I asked him. He drafted Clayton Kershaw. He drafted Corey Seager. He drafted
baseball is
Cody
Cody
Bellinger, I believe. He drafted like 4 or 5 really great all-time Dodgers, right? And I said, Ned, how did you guys do this? I mean, you were with the Giants for years. How did you guys do this? How did you come up with these guys? And he goes, you know what, Larry? It's essential that you go and meet these guys.
Yeah.
Because when you meet them, you find out their investment, you find out their dedication, you find out their habits because they'll speak them out loud. You find out how important baseball is to them, and football. That is really the ultimate question. I guarantee you that will be the most frequently asked question during the combine to all these players. Jeff Ireland may be asking Des Bryant if his mom's a prostitute, but besides that one, the question that's most commonly asked is, do you love football? And the correct answer for those who don't know is yes, I do love football. But it's how you say it, and it's also about your other interests. If you have a bunch of eclectic interests, guess what? He doesn't love football.
Vernon Davis.
He's if you're maybe gonna play a year and then check out. Chris Borland, who cares if you have a great rookie year if you're just gonna play 1 year and that's it? So these guys want to know. And these NFL scouts, they want to know, what's your commitment? Are we going to invest a first round pick in you and you're going to play 1 year and check out? Do you love football, or are you just good at it? Believe it or not, there are guys that get to the pro level and they don't love it. And you got to weed those guys out, because those guys are looking at their watch at the facility going, I got to get home. I got to get home. What you got to have is you got to have a whole room full of guys who are looking at their watch at home going, man, I got to get to the facility. I got to get to the facility. Those are the guys you're looking for. So it's hard to figure that out. Who lives and dies and breathes football. And that's why you got to meet these guys. I guarantee you, if I had met Brock Purdy, I would be like, yeah, I really like this guy. This guy's real, because he's so competitive. He's so competitive. I mean, you talk to Brock Purdy about anything, and he wants to win. I joked with him one day that Brandon Allen told me he could beat Brock in golf, and I told Brock about it, and he was like, you know what? My elbow's been bad, and this and that. I've been rehabbing. You tell him I'm going to get good enough, and I'm going to take his money. I mean, well, and he was serious. He was absolutely serious. He wasn't like, tell him I'll take his money. He's like, tell him I'm going to get good, I'm going to play, and I'm going to take his money. And it was like, I don't care if you're playing Monopoly. This guy wants to win, and that is what you need.
You know what's interesting that you say that is that when you get around Brock, and I know you've done interviews with him, but like last year at training camp, for example, we're doing the interview with him, and he stares down at the ground. He's very unassuming. So,
while he's answering the question.
And he's, you're a quarterback and you want a leader and you want a guy that's going to look you in the eyes and you want this guy that's like fire and brimstone guy, leader. And that's not Brock. So I know why, and then he has these physical limitations. So I know why he fell down draft boards, because I'm sure in those meetings he was maybe doing a better job of looking him in the eye or doing those kind of things. But by nature, he's not a boisterous guy. He's not a look at me guy. He looks down at the ground when he speaks. I mean, it was weird. And he knows Papa very well. I know him enough. It's not like, we're this national media that he's never met before, but yet he is a little bit shy. We played some funny stuff of him doing some ads, and we asked him, we're like, well, how would you grade your ad skills? And he was so embarrassed. He was like, do we have to keep playing these? Like, so you would have to spend a lot of time around Brock for what you just pointed out, which is he's got this quiet confidence about him, but it doesn't jump off the page, and you have to speak with him a lot to see that inner confidence. And now that he's been around a long time, he's got that confidence. Trent Williams knew that, right when he got in the huddle, those kind of things. But how would you know that unless you spend a lot of time around Brock? Because you looked at him and you go, why did he go in the 7th round? Okay, there's the obvious physical skills, but in those meetings at the combine, when you're looking for that big fiery leader, that's just not Brock. But the more time you spend around him, you realize that kind of he's this silent assassin type. And then you go, oh, there it is. But it takes a while for it to come out, for you to pull it out of him. So that's why
I know
that's why you got to be around guys.
Yeah, you do. And Ray McLeod, I did an interview with Ray, and he's like, man, I knew Brock was special the first training camp practice. I'm like, really? Tell me about it. And he's like, man, I was in the wrong place, and he just got in my grill and told me, what the fuck? And he just sounded me out. And he just commands the huddle in a way that he'll tell guys that have been in this league for 15 years to shut the F up. And, while he's talking, and he's polite.
Like the first time they did it, it's like, who's this
polite,
guy that like Clark Kent Superman deal?
Yeah, he's going to tell you what's up. Let's hit a couple of these supers. Chico Travels Vlog says, how big of a voice will Montana be as 49ers new owner? What? 49ers will go all out like the Rams when they hosted the Super Bowl. Big trades, Stafford, big free agent signings.
He might be referencing only because when he was on Rich Eisen during the Super Bowl week, Eisen went on this huge tangent after Joe came on, and he was defending Purdy, but saying, well, if Joe Montana
like, pay him, right?
gives him an endorsement, then that's all you need to know. And Montana wouldn't know the game. And my thought was, all due respect to Joe, because you played and were great doesn't mean that your insight is better. In fact, like Brady, for example, like everyone's all, oh, Brady's going to be able to pick the quarterback for the Raiders. Okay, we'll see.
A different skill set.
Well, and the reason why successful, really, really successful athletes don't become really, really successful head coaches or whatever is because they assume everybody sees the game like they do, and no one does. People didn't see the game like Bird and Magic and Brady and all these guys. And so they're like, aren't you seeing this? And we're a bunch of dopes going, no, I don't see it that way. And they go, I don't get it. How can you not see it? Whereas you have these guys who maybe in high school they were really good, then college kind of good, then pros barely made it. So they've been the star, they've been the middle guy, and they've been the terrible guy. And so they know how everybody on the team looks, thinks, relates. When you're a star, you just relate as a star. And so because Joe Montana was a great quarterback, maybe the greatest, it doesn't mean that Joe has this magical power that he touches someone and all of a sudden he knows who's going to be great. The position itself is the most difficult to evaluate in all of sports. What is there? 5 great ones, maybe 3 great ones right now, 3 elite ones, another 3 or 4 really good ones. And then on any given Sunday, a handful of them can be really, really good. And then that's it. Like it's hard to find and develop these guys. So it doesn't mean that Joe, because he was a great quarterback, can pick quarterbacks. That's not the way it goes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and even Kyle. I mean, Kyle's a really smart football guy, right? But I'd put my ability to pick players up against his any day because it's a different skill set. It's a different skill set. When what he's trying to call a play, sequence a play, it's about coverage, it's about all kinds of things. That's a different skill set than looking at 5 guys that are all 6'5", 280 and saying those 2 guys are not football players at all. Those 2 guys are going to be, 3rd round, 4th round picks, and they're going to play 5 years and do well. And that guy's going to the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? And it's like that's a different skill. And it's rare that you have both skills. How many people in the history of football were both Vince Lombardi and, the greatest GM of all time? If you want to say Jim Finks, the creator of the Bears, right. Some people say he's the best GM. Some people say Kevin Colbert, who's a GM for the Steelers for years and years and years, that he's one of the great GMs. Some people say Ozzie Newsome, who was obviously a Hall of Fame tight end, but he was maybe Ozzie Newsome's the greatest GM. Some people say Tony Rossano, who was a Niners scout from way back when. So, you take the best personnel guy, he's devoted his life to that. You take the best play caller, he's devoted his life to that. When you've devoted your life to something, you get good at it. It's just like anything else. I mean, it's no different than what we do. Could there be somebody who's great on TV and great on the radio? I personally think Radnich was great on TV and great on the radio. But it's rare. It's rare. Most TV people are warm, and that's why they're good on TV. Oprah and all these they're warm people. The people that are good on the radio, Rush, who's no longer with us, Stern, they're cold. People that are on the radio are cold. The cold people on the radio are what works on the radio. Warm people, Marky Banya's on television be like, that's your sporting life. And he's like warm. He's warm. But if you want to talk about Jim Rome's cold. He's like, he called Casey Martin his withered leg the stick. I mean, he called like Tara Lipinski a whore or something, didn't he? I mean, he was like, Rome was harsh.
It's funny. I was probably 5 years into my radio career, and there was a TV guy. Well, Colin Cowherd. I worked with Colin Cowherd in Portland, and he was actually a TV guy who got into radio and ended up liking radio a lot more than TV. And then now, of course, he does both. But he was originally a TV guy out of Las Vegas. But my point is that, so I was working in Portland probably 5 years into my radio career, and my program director at the time said, because there was a big studio and there was a sports update studio. And he said, why don't you go sit in the sports update studio in case this guy, and I can't remember, he was like the big high profile guy in the market, the big TV guy. And he's like, I could do radio in my sleep. So I said, all right, fill in one day. And he goes, all right. So the show starts at like noon, and I'm just sitting in there. I wasn't doing sports updates. They're just like, if the guy starts to flail, then help him out. So he throws everything he has against the wall. And, TV sports guys are used to doing, back in the day, like 90 seconds and they're out, right? 2 minutes and they're out. And he throws everything against the wall. And he thinks if he just throws the phone number out there that he's the big, the big cheese. And so everyone's going to be dying to call him and everything. But back in that day, callers and everything, or reaction on your show right now, comes from the things that you say. People react off what you say. You don't just say, hi, I'm the great news guy, and just call the number, 888-CALL. Yeah. And then, so he throws out through 3 topics. They're stupid. He, basically is using his big voice. It's probably, I don't know, you got to break at about 15. It's probably 12:04. The guy looks at me like this and gives me like a shrug. There's no phones or anything going. And he's looking at me like, what's going on here, man? I'm like the big TV guy. Isn't this, we're 4 minutes in. And I'm like, and I talk back to him and I go, you got 3 more hours, bro. I just remember laughing. And so like by 12:07, I'm on the air with the guy and we're going back and forth because he thinks that, he's a big star and everyone's going to call and talk to him. He's out of gas and it's 12:07.
Bob Agnew, who used to run KMBR, told me, he's like, we had an ex-football player come in and he wanted to do a show. And I won't name the player because he's an ex-Niner, but I don't want to embarrass him. I don't even know if he's still around. But the guy came in and started the show. And they came out of a commercial and there was dead air. And Agnew was in his office and he's like, then they went to a commercial. And he's like, what the heck's going on? So he runs down the hall. And the hallway, it was like 2 long hallways away. So he's like, and he's a short guy with short legs. So he's squatty, he's running. Yeah. And he goes into the studio. He's like, what the fuck? What the fuck? What's going on?
That's a great Agnew, man. That's a great Agnew.
And the guy goes, I said everything I needed. I said everything I wanted. I said everything I was prepared to say. That's what the guy said. I said everything that I was prepared to say. And he's like, what? What? What do you mean? You gotta keep going. So Agnew put a sign on the studio that says, keep talking. Whatever you do, keep talking. But this guy who had been a TV guy basically he talked for 4 minutes. He was done. So it's funny when my kids were little, like really little. My littlest guy used to be like, Dad, you don't do anything. You just talk. Yeah, all this stuff. When he was like 7 or 8. You just talk, Dad. Yeah, you just talk, right? And I go, yeah. I go, but it's pretty hard. No, it isn't. You just talk. You just keep talking. And I go, okay, how about this? How long? Do you want to know how long the average segment is? He's like, and he's less than 10 years old, but he's really cute. My youngest guy. He's now like 14. And I go, the average segment is 7 minutes. Okay, let's just say
doesn't sound
minutes.
Like that much. Yeah, right.
Yeah, 7 minutes. I go, that's not very much, right? I go, so this is what we'll do. After dinner, I'll get my stopwatch out and we'll set it for 7 minutes and you just talk for 7 minutes. Okay? He's like, no problem. And it was hilarious. It was hilarious. I mean, he was like, welcome to my show. And he's like kind of a little kid and everything. And after like 30 seconds, he's like out. He's like, I have nothing else to say. And he's like, well, I guess it's a little harder than I thought, Dad. So cute. Man. So cute. I mean, it was like, I look at my wife and I'm like, yeah, look, my other kids are older. They're like, I bet he doesn't have 3 minutes of stuff.
That's
sure. Tremendous. He didn't even have a minute before he was like, and
that's always good.
All these like really, it was cute, but it was funny as hell. We got this one from G Code Travels Vlog POV. How big? Okay, we got that one. We got this one from Yo Stricken, Kevin's lookalike from Tucson here. We have I forget his name, but Kevin's lookalike. When we did video calls, a guy called in from Tucson. He had real curly hair. And we said
looked just like Kevin.
He looked just like Kevin. We called him Kevin's doppelganger. He said Kevin's lookalike from Tucson here. Seen McMillan play in person dozens of times, and he's legit. Fastest, biggest, and strongest every play monster. Who's he talking about?
McMillan, the receiver from Arizona.
Oh, we're talking about, yeah.
No, I think he's going to be a nice player.
Yeah, he's huge.
I'm just saying, like, value and what the Niners need, and at 11, if he's sitting there at 11, I don't know. I guess they could take him, but I think that there's going to be a needy team in that range that is going to say if he drops that far, and we are starting to see in mock drafts that he's maybe dropping a little further because he's a top 10 talent. I don't think there's any question about it.
He runs 4.3s, top 5.
Well, and the other thing is that there just isn't the high end receivers that there were in last year's draft. So I could see a team, and there are a lot of teams that need receivers this year. If Ayuk was a free agent this year, the Niners would have traded him because last year there just wasn't the leverage that there is this year. There's a handful of teams that need receivers, and you think Cincinnati's going to pay T. Higgins the money that he wants and Chase
him.
And they're talking about Chase at $40 million. Like, so the Bengals are going to be in the need. Like I said, Pittsburgh and New England never got the receivers they needed. There's a number of teams that need receivers this year, and the value of the position continues to go up. So it's not that I don't think that kid's good. He is. And if he starts to slide in the range of the Niners, I think somebody would come up and give the Niners something pretty good for him.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty logical. Ryan Aloy says, what are your thoughts on teams like Philly, Kansas City, L.A. drafting players with off-field issues while the Niners won't? Does it hurt them? Best player available sometimes comes with risk. This is a great question. This is the ultimate question. A lot of times, guys, when there'll be a guy in the draft, and like I follow it super closely, right? So there'll be a guy, and I'll be like, wow, I think this guy's badass. And yet the mock drafts have him in the 6th round, 7th round. And two guys come to mind that I thought before the draft, why are these guys so low? Yeah. One of them was Aaron Hernandez. I thought I watched Aaron Hernandez of Florida. He was terrific. He's short, but he was a really good player. I mean, really good player. And I thought he probably should have gone in the 2nd round. And instead, he didn't. He went much later, and it was because the NFL investigators, they build a dossier on all these players, and they share that information with the teams. And so when you see a player that gets drafted, but he gets drafted rounds later, the other guy that I really loved as a player, and I watched him, and I'm looking at him mocked in the 6th, 7th round. Seattle took him in the 2nd round because they obviously didn't care. But Frank Clark. And Frank Clark had some rough things in his past. Mm-hmm. If people look at Micah Parsons, and they're like, oh, why did Micah Parsons fall so far? Micah Parsons was a preseason top 5 pick who got involved in an ugly hazing incident at Penn State where it was ugly. I mean, I won't even speak to it, but it was ugly. And it was high. Everybody knew about it. And it really showed that he's got kind of questionable ethics. And so he fell. Now, he didn't fall out of the 1st round, but he fell. Randy Moss went 21. He was the greatest player. Randy Moss should have gone right after Peyton Manning. Should have been
Notre
2nd
Dame
pick in the
Marshall.
draft. Yeah, but he went 21st.
Yeah.
Dallas went with Greg Ellis at 7 and Jerry said Greg Ellis is the kind of guy you could have babysit your kids. But unfortunately, he couldn't play dead, and you passed on Randy Moss. And why did they pass on Randy Moss? Because Michael Irvin and his house where he was taking women and all this, that was all became public, and they were afraid of Randy Moss. I mean, and it's all copycat stuff. So it's like 1 year, you see Lawrence Phillips go top 10. Then one of those guys has a problem and it gets in trouble with the law. Suddenly, the guy with the checkered past then falls, and he goes, Randy Moss falls to 21. So that's what happens. As far as these other teams, I'll say this, and I've said this many times. It's a rough game played by rough guys. Okay, so you do have to dance with the devil a little bit and take a chance. Charles Haley was a Hall of Famer. All right? The Niners drafted him. Bill Walsh was convicted. He said, I want Charles Haley. Charles Haley's going to play for us. Okay. I bet you didn't do too much due diligence on Charles, but Charles had real problems. And he made it to the Hall of Fame anyway. But the anger, he urinated on Seifert's car. They had to trade him in his prime. I mean, all these things. But he still made the Hall of Fame. So all I would say is it's a rough game played by rough guys. You do have to take a chance from time to time on the defensive side of the ball, especially on some guys who are, not the greatest character. But here's the thing. You got to know your room. You got to have 3 or 4 good guys for every bad guy. If the ratio goes the other way and you have 3 or 4 bad guys for every good guy on the team, when the going gets tough, guys will quit. When the going gets tough, guys will turn on each other. When the going gets tough, guys will disappear and it won't work out. You have to have a certain amount of personal character across your football team, but you also have to have Chris Jones, Mm-hmm. Is Chris Jones a bad guy? No, not necessarily, but he's rough. And if you looked at Kansas City in a lot of those Super Bowls, man, Chris Jones chews the rest of his line mates' ass out, like in the harshest way ever. Like I saw a couple times on the Niner Super Bowls where the Niners had some advantage early in those games, where he literally was like, "If you don't play as hard as I want you to play, I will kill you." You know what I mean? And there were guys like sitting there on the bench going, Like big, bad defensive linemen who weigh 300 pounds are like, this Chris is going to kill me.
Right.
And I asked Nick Allegretti, who's a friend of mine who played for Kansas City, went against Chris Jones every day in practice. And he said, yeah. He said, absolutely, Krueg. He's like, Chris Jones is our heartbeat. He's our tone setter. He's the guy that sets the standard for how we play violently and physically. And if you don't play to his standard, he will kick your ass. I mean, it was like a quote.
Yeah.
He will kill you if you don't play to that standard. And Charles Haley was like that, and Ronnie was like that, and Jimmy Ward is like that, and Dante Whitner was like that, and Alex Boone is like that. And you gotta have these guys. Alex Boone got in trouble, in college. He got in trouble. He had a checkered past. I think Whitner might have had something along the way. But guess what? These guys are, it's a tough game. It's a rough game. It's played by tough, rough guys. You got to have some of them on your team, man. Simple as that. You can't have a room full of nice guys. You got to have.
I agree with
guys.
that, but some of it comes with, like you said, how can your locker room handle it? Do you have enough leaders? Also, some of it is history. For example, Mark Davis, Fred Militnikov's daughter, was killed in a domestic violence. Mark Davis will not draft any players, will not sign any players that have domestic violence in their past. Just period.
I think the Niners feel that way too.
They do to a point too, but they're not risk adverse. Joe Williams, you mentioned, he had a lot of off the field problems. Reuben Foster had a lot of off the field problems.
But that's early in the regime, John.
Yeah, it was. But I think what happens is,
look at the recent picks.
That's what I'm saying. Is I think what happens is that they'll learn from those decisions and decide to themselves, you know what, maybe we're risk adverse on certain players and not others. Do we have enough players? Because the one thing is the 49ers have more Fred Warners and George Kittles and leaders like that on their team that hold people accountable. Trent Williams does, Brock Purdy does. So they can mix some of those guys in, maybe a little bit more than they do. But again, they have figured out, and John Lynch has said this a million times, and I know both of us have talked to John about this, which is they have a certain player that is a 49er. Now, there's an obvious thing that's everybody talks about in sports. There is a risk reward. If you are super talented, like Jalen Carter went 10th. Jalen Carter should have went at like 3rd to Seattle that year. I think Seattle took Witherspoon at 5 or something like that. But I mean, he
was the best tackle. Georgia player, right. And he wore 88. He was awesome in college.
Yeah, so he should have been a top 5 pick. But there were teams that were nervous. And here's the other thing too: where do you live? Where's your fan base? Like, there's certain fan bases in the East, in the Midwest, but especially in the East. They don't care. Like, your fan base is not going to rebel because the Philadelphia Eagles signed Michael Vick.
The Niners can't sign Kareem Hunt.
That's what I'm saying. They can, in this market, that's another part of it. So there's all these things based on his question, what he's asking, is that there are just certain players who do certain things who the Niners can't draft because of where they are. Now, you go to Philadelphia or New York or something like that, they're just like win. Or if your team has, winning 2 and 3 games every single year, you'll take more of a chance than a team like Kansas City or San Francisco that wins on a higher occasion because they can be more selective. But they can also take guys where they say, okay, let's sign this guy to a 1-year deal because he might be able to help us at a position in need that's a veteran because we've got so many veteran leaders. You may not want to take a young guy that's got all sorts of problems and is kind of a jackass and everything, but you could say, okay, let's just take a chance on this key guy for this year. I mean, remember in 94, like the Niners, Tim Harris, and I mean, you go on down the line, there's certain guys, and you talk to Dennis Brown about it. Like, they weren't choir boys, but they knew that like they had the locker room to handle it. Plus, it was a short-term deal. It wasn't like they were signing to major money for 5 years. So, based on Ryan's question, there's just so many there's so many parts of the equation. It's not just as simple as saying the Niners won't take guys that are a risk. They will. It's just there's certain parameters which they won't cross, and then there's all these different things that we just talked about that make it whether your team is going to be, up for risk or not.
Yeah, no question. I mean, and just because you draft a guy that has questionable character, it may or may not show itself in his career. It may not show itself till after his career. I mean, I think of Dana Stubblefield. Dana Stubblefield was a great Niner. He was the defensive player of the year in the league. He was on the pregame show. I did many shows with Dana. I really liked Dana. And then Dana had a terrible, heinous crime that caused him to be incarcerated. And now I believe he's out and he's served his time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, his character flaws didn't show themselves necessarily early on, at least not to me. Now, if we talk to Dennis Brown, who was in that room with him every day, he might have be able to tell you a different story, right? Because he knew him a lot better. So, I mean, you have to kind of pick your spots. You have to kind of realize, I mean, when you're dealing with somebody with serious problems, Aaron Hernandez, and when you're just dealing with a young kid who's playing a violent game and he's a little high strung, you know what I mean? You gotta see what you can deal with. I mean, like I think Alden Smith. Give you an example. Alden Smith, the Niners took him. He had a checkered past. He had a checkered career. But you know, he was really like you interviewed him. I interviewed him. He was super smart guy. One of the smarter guys you're gonna talk to. He was a great interview. Super smart guy. But he just had a problem. He had a substance problem. He had an alcohol.
He was
problem.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Like the Niners took him 7th overall, and I know you know this. I watched the first practice he ever had. And Joe Staley came off the field and just goes, I don't know how to block that guy. He's got these big, long vine arms, and he's a freak. I don't know what to do. And then the worst thing that happened to him is he got some money in his pocket and he didn't know what to do. We interviewed him at the Super Bowl in New York, and his hand was the year that he, had all those problems, and then accelerator, 7:30 in the morning, drunk, all those things.
Showed up at the police station or something, courthouse.
We asked him the first, because his handler goes, please don't ask him anything about drinking. We're like, then we don't want him on. Like, it's the whole reason we're going to have him on. And the handler's like, whatever. And so the first thing out of my mouth was, so do you have a handle on things, Alden, or where are you at with this? And the guy freaked out. His handler at the Super Bowl freaked out. But Alden held his hand up and went, hey, there's a whole reason I'm on this station here specifically was I want to talk about this stuff and I want to address it. So I understand what, we talked about in the combine, how you read guys. Alden was so smart and so focused,
very smart,
and he was very real in what he said and owned up to everything. And I was thinking to myself in the back of my head, this guy has got the spiel down. I didn't believe a word he said, but in terms of the Niners and saying of the issues that he could have had, and I don't know if he had any of these at Missouri when he was drafted, but it was like, I could see where he could fool a team because he was so smart in what he said, and he said all the right things and showed contrition and the fact, and so you're thinking, God, this guy's he's never gonna have any more problems. Dude, that was like his 3rd or 4th year in the league. I mean, he had so many problems after that. It was just, he could say the right things and bullshit you, and it's smart and all these different things. So when fans get on teams about how did you not know, we all have friends like that just are so good at laying down the bullshit. And then it's like they're still the same person. And Alden couldn't get away from his demons, and I feel terrible for it. But I don't blame the 49ers for it, because I saw firsthand, like, this dude could convince you that he was on the up and up and he was on the straight and narrow and it was all good. He said all the right things, told this handler, get out of my face. I'm going to address these things. I made the mistake. I'm just like, wow. And he was, at that point, he was probably, because he came into the league young at like 20. I don't know, maybe he was 25 at that point. And I thought, this guy's he's going to be fine. He's going to get it together. Hell no. So you just never know.
You never know. You never know. And it's, or it could go well for a while and then, then it stops going well. So, all right. Last thought on the way out the door here. What did you make of NBA All-Star Weekend? I mean, it was here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just like, it's, I mean, it was weird. It's like, I love the Too Short concert.
Mm-hmm.
I love Steph's intro. Right. There were a couple minutes there, but it's like, does anybody like basketball anymore? I mean, what happened to basketball? Where's basketball?
Yeah.
I saw the breakdown, John, they had the breakdown of hours, and it was like, let me see if I have it here. It was like 2 hour. Here it is. This is crazy.
Oh, you mean content of basketball versus content of TNT talking and patting itself on the back? Yeah, I saw that number.
All that Ernie stuff, all the Ernie stuff and everything.
Yeah, it was too much of that.
What the heck? It's just like,
well, what it tells you is that when TNT decides, and this is planned for the entire weekend, to make it more about the entertainment side and patting themselves on the back for being great partners with the NBA and all the different things they did versus actually playing basketball, what they tried to do is downplay the coverage of it. But the problem with the whole thing is that, everybody is trying to figure out how to fix it. and it's not a fixable item. Like what the NHL is doing is phenomenal. And the fact that they tried all these things and they figured it out, because people forget the NHL All-Star game used to be like 16-14. It was terrible and people bitching and moaning. But here's the biggest problem. LeBron James, an hour and a half before the game, says, I'm not playing, my foot hurts. He's the leader. He's the leading vote getter. He's the player that the fans wanted. He's the only reason, probably one of the few reasons, that advertisers bought, the All-Star game when they had their big package in front of them. Hey, you're going to get the finals, and you're going to get the playoffs, and you're going to get the All-Star game. And then an hour and a half before, the guy who basically calls himself the king, self-anointed king, and is basically the overseer of the sport right now, decides that an hour and a half before the game, he's going to not play. He can't even be bothered to get into the uniform to take the pictures. But then last night, I'm watching the Hornets and the Lakers game, and he's dancing around the court beforehand. He puts up a ferocious dunk. He's putting up his foot is fine. So let me get this straight. Either you have the greatest doctors ever, and you're 40 and you're playing pretty well. You couldn't bother. And the All-Star game is not hard. You couldn't be bothered, even though you're leading vote getter and the biggest name in the sport, for 5 minutes to jog up and down the court. And so I'm looking at that as a player in the All-Star game going, well, if LeBron doesn't care, why do I care? It permeates through the whole thing. And then if Steph's not going to be in the 3, then why do I watch that? And if Max McClung is the leading dunker, even though he's a G League guy, Woody Harrelson from White Men Can't Jump is the dunker, why should I care? So everyone's asking how to fix it. I don't know. How about starting with giving a shit? How about caring about the game? How about caring about the sport, that it's not a joke? How about caring that the fans voted you in and want to see you, or that the advertisers paid all this money? LeBron didn't play because his foot hurt, but 3 days later, he's throwing down dunks in a non-nationally televised game against Charlotte. What does that tell you about what he thinks the All-Star game, which then permeates through the players to the fans? No one cares. No one cares about the game. So why would anybody care? Like Kobe, when he played hard and demanded others played. Now it's, if you play hard, like Wembanyama tried to play hard. It's too bad he's out for the year, but Wembanyama tried to play hard in the game, and guys looked at him like, what are you doing, bro? Ease off the gas pedal. Like, it's broken because
it's not,
they
it's
don't care.
Weird. It's like it's
right. So why should
like
fans care? Why
cool.
should advertisers? Why should anyone care if the biggest player in the sport spits in the face
cool
of the game?
It's not cool to try, though. It's
right.
Like it's
and
weird.
Then, yeah, but if everybody, if no one cares, if the bare minimum that an athlete should give, which is effort, cannot be done in the All-Star game, then it can't be anything, because we're watching these guys, and I don't know why this is for America generally. These guys playing for their country with the All-Stars in hockey, they want to win. They want to be called the greatest. I don't know that you can't replicate that, because the OGs versus the young guys versus the world versus the U.S. versus, like, hockey can do that, and they found their way. But the NBA can't separate everybody out. Just East-West and try to care.
They're too overpaid. They're too overpaid.
Right, money. You can't throw money. You can't say we're going to play a tournament for $10 million.
I mean, look at
Steph makes $800,000 a game.
I mean, Ben Simmons. People are like, why doesn't Ben Simmons work on his free throws? He's got $150 million in the bank, and he's got another $60 million coming to him, guaranteed, no matter what he does. Why would he ever? It's like if you came from nothing and someone gave you $150 million, that would kill my motivation. I mean, if you give somebody that much money, you're killing their motivation. But the bigger issue is 4.7 million people watch the NBA All-Star game. 4.7 million. It's down over 80% from viewership in the past. John, it's down 13% from last year. The 5 lowest rated NBA All-Star games since Bird and Magic have all happened in the last 5 years. I mean, that's unbelievable.
I don't know how they motivate him to care. I mean, that the bottom line to the whole thing is it's an unanswerable question, I think, for the league, which is, how do we make these guys care? And it really should start with LeBron James. So LeBron James doesn't play, and then 3 days later plays against Charlotte in a non-televised, non-national.
I mean, we're banging on
game.
LeBron. We could bang on Steph. Where was he?
Well, that's what I mean. He
didn't play in the 3-point shooting contest.
And I know Steph had a lot to do, but he's got to be in the 3-point contest. And then the other thing that doesn't help is that when TNT, who's the broadcaster, and I give Charles Barkley a ton of credit, because I guarantee the league said to Charles, look, if you're going to rip San Francisco again, you can stay home, because we can't have our highest profile talent on the station carrying the game to rip the city that the game is being played in. So Charles played nice and had a $250,000 donation and did those things. He'll probably revert back. But another big problem was
Draymond ripped it, though.
Draymond. So Draymond Green, who's become this hot take artist, what's the weekend, Draymond? A 0. Hey, Draymond, what's the game like? It sucks. I mean, and then, but
he's right.
Draymond, but he's not wrong. But the contradiction Draymond had was he wanted the game to go back to the way the game used to be played. The very game that he said 48 hours earlier sucked and was terrible. And so if I'm the commissioner, I'm going, hey, man, you're not helping me here. Your guy, Steph Curry, helped design this stuff. At least they tried something. But it's really unfixable if the players cannot give the bare minimum of what an athlete gives, which is effort. And we as fans, we finance all that stuff, because the advertisers wouldn't pay the money unless there was enough eyes and enough people cared. They don't care. And we know it as fans that they don't care about the three. They don't care about the skills. They don't care about the dunk. They don't care about the game. So why would anyone care and watch? And there's no stakes on the line, and money won't motivate them. And you can't give them home court like baseball tried to do, home field advantage. And you can't do that.
Well, here's the other thing that's
that nobody cares about.
It's so loathsome too. Nobody wants to watch. I mean, the people who run the NBA, Adam Silver's a fucking jackass. I mean, he is so fucking stupid. It's unbelievable.
Well,
he looks like a smart guy, but he's fucking stupid. Here, let me just tell you exactly why. Nobody's watching the NBA from November to Christmas. A lot of people view Christmas Day as the opening night of the NBA.
That's a good
call.
A
lot of people don't even turn on the NBA until Christmas. And until the NFL said, oh, by the way, you think you're going to run Christmas? Get lost. We're running Christmas. And now the NBA just was like, oh, damn, that sucks. So they have a real problem. So they create a tournament, a bogus tournament. Okay. And what do? They have, this would be a golden opportunity to give your fans something that you have in abundance, and that is gear and merch. There's a warehouse somewhere that has so much NBA merch that we have no idea what to do with it. All right, just merch on top of merch. You could have said this is about the fans, and the winner of each one of these games, everybody who goes to those games, you can take your ticket stub, go to NBA store online, and get something that's worth $20, whatever, pick your arbitrary amount. You can get one sweatshirt, one hat, one whatever. Now you're going to have that many more of your fans wearing your gear, which is an advertisement. They're basically walking billboards for your sport. No. Do they do that? Nah. Let's give LeBron and other bloated NBA players who aren't worth the salaries that they're making now, who are playing the game at a really low level compared to the guys that came before them. Let's give them an extra $500,000, because if they play hard, the fans will be super excited. It's like, so we're giving multi-millionaire pampered NBA players $500,000 to play hard when they already should play hard. We were asking the question the other day, who's the oldest player to win a championship, and somebody looked it up. It was like Abdul-Jabbar, in like 87.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, in 87, he was 40 years old. He played 80 games.
Yeah,
80 games. Abdul-Jabbar. This guy played in the 60s. In 87, he's playing 80 games, and LeBron can't even
40 minutes a night. By the way,
can't play the full schedule. I need rest. And we know, I need this. I need that.
We know
I can't
that
play
they
the
don't
All-Star
care.
game. So
we know they don't care about the All-Star game. We know they don't care about playing the game. Draymond all the time, and they don't understand that the gauntlet is part of winning the championship. You're supposed to play 82 games.
It's a war of attrition.
40 minutes in those games, and then you have a championship. All these guys want to do is like the video game, and you get killed, and then you got to start over. They don't want to go through all the crap that you have to go through, but that's what a championship is. And the reason why the NFL works is because every game matters. 162 games. How many out of 162 matter? 5 at the end of the season, maybe, if you're fighting for a playoff spot. How many in the NBA matter? Like, we're not even at that point because we're sitting here saying the worst could win. Draymond's like, we're going to win a championship. You're 10th, man. Like you're 10th. So it's they in the NBA it's hard to relate to NBA players because, like you said, the top guys now are making 60 and 70 a year. They don't care. They don't want to be in the All-Star game. It's an inconvenience, and they're not even good enough to fake it. Like we all have days where we just hate being at work and we don't want to do this, but we fake it. LeBron doesn't even have why would I fake it? Hey, LeBron, we're going to take a team picture. Yeah, I'll just do it in my t-shirt and backwards hat if that's cool. Like, dude, at least put on the uniform. He can't even do that. An hour and a half before the game, he says, the guy asked him the question, what do you expect to see from you, LeBron, tonight? You're not going to see anything from me because my ankle and foot hurt. And then he's tomahawk jamming against the Charlotte Hornets 3 days later. He's just spitting in the face of advertisers, the NBA, and everybody else sees it. So I'm a young player who just played in that game. Victor Wembanyama. I guess nobody cares about this game. So then he's the big face. Victor is the next face, even though he's out the rest of this year. And then he carries that on to the next guy. I don't know where it got lost between Bird, Kobe, and people actually caring about the game. If you care, why don't people want to compete anymore? Like this goes to the combine too. So guys don't want to challenge Max McClung or whatever the hell. Why? Because they're going to look stupid, so they don't want to compete. What happened to athletes who want to compete? Because if the NBA All-Star game could be good if people wanted to compete, but they don't want to be exposed. Same thing. The agent is telling Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward and all these guys, don't throw at the combine. Don't run at the combine. You're supposed to be the best. Like, why aren't you running to go, hey, I ran a 4.3. Like, why did Lamar Jackson never ran? Why aren't you running? Why aren't you throwing? Why aren't you? Because nobody wants to get embarrassed. All these stars don't want to dunk or shoot the three or anything because they have a brand, and it's not good for the brand to lose to Max McClung. Nobody wants to compete.
It's a terrible product. There's so many guys who aren't worth the money. Derek White makes $20 million. Lonzo Ball makes $21 million.
That just tells you.
Malcolm Brogdon makes $22 million. Malcolm Brogdon makes $22 million.
Seriously, he hasn't been relevant in like 5 years, that dude.
Tobias Harris makes like
he's stolen money for years.
$25 million, Tobias Harris. Jonathan Isaac makes $25 million.
He's not even we
haven't named a good player yet. Isaiah Hartenstein is making $30 million. Jordan Poole makes $29 million.
We're
talking about some really bad players. We're talking about guys who are just okay or just, it's just unbelievable. And and at the top of the scale, it's not better.
Right.
It's like you got these guys are they were good once, but when was the last time Bradley Beal played? He's making $50 million.
And they gave him a no trade. That's what's killing the Suns. They gave him and LeBron are the only two players in the league with a no trade. He has a no trade. And so he's just, hey, will you help us get Jimmy Butler? And you go to Miami? No. No. The Suns are screwed. I don't understand why Durant said no to the Warriors. He lied the other day when he said it was because he didn't want to move in the middle of the season. Dude, you don't want to be on the Warriors. You don't want to be second banana.
He's annoying as hell.
You don't like Draymond. Like, we know why you don't want to come here. Don't sit there and insult our intelligence. I didn't want to move in the middle of the season. Dude,
they're all liars, too. How about Jimmy Butler?
That's a flat-out lie.
How about Jimmy Butler? Somebody asked him at the presser, Jimmy, why did you want to leave Miami? And he's like, you know what? I don't know. He actually said that. He said that.
Money.
It's like, what do you mean you don't know? You wanted a $110 million 2-year extension. They said, screw you. That's why you wanted out. He just didn't want to say it.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to say it.
The other day where he told Malik Andrews that it wasn't that nothing about what had been said. It was because he didn't want to move in the middle of the season. Could you think of an easier move for Durant? He's already lived here. The Warriors take care of everything. You know where to eat. You know where to live. You've already lived. It's not like you're going to somewhere you've never lived in the middle of the season. You're in Phoenix. They're not going anywhere. Dude, you don't want to be second banana in Steph's town. You don't want to be perceived as it's Steph's title when you don't. Like, he's way too thin-skinned with these big rabbit ears. He's so worried about what everybody thinks. And you know what? When they do the Warriors version of The Last Dance, he's going to flat out say it. I hate Draymond. Everybody hates Draymond. Draymond's a pain in the ass. Like, when they can be really honest,
Right.
Kevin Durant stayed on the Suns, who are going nowhere, with Bradley Beal as a big cock block on that team because he's got a no trade, and you're going to sit there with a straight face and say that it's because you didn't want to move in the middle of the season to a place you've already lived before. Give me a break.
Kawhi
It's
Leonard
so
has played
ridiculous.
15 games this year. He's making $49 million. Next year he makes
That's
50.
a sweet gig.
Next
Bro,
year
that's a
after
sweet
that he
gig.
makes 50. He's going to make $150 million, and he's played 15 games this year.
That's a sweet gig if you can get it.
I mean, it's just like
50
it's
million.
just bloated. It's bloated. And Kevin Hart, get lost.
Yeah.
What's that? I mean,
Did he say one thing funny all weekend? Like one thing where you actually laugh?
Plus, even though the ratings were bad, they're actually much worse because you think the NBA, Kevin Hart's a viral sensation. He's there. Mr. Beast is a viral sensation. He was there. On the All-Star game was 2 hours and 26 minutes of commercials and ad breaks, 33 minutes and 41 seconds of game time.
Yeah, they
33 minutes.
And they did that by design. I mean, that's the whole thing, is they tried to do all these different things.
Who was it made for?
Well, the thing that was weird is when those guys are in studio, the Inside the NBA guys, they're the funniest guys around, and they're one of the best shows that have ever been as far as the style of show that they do. But they relied on a bunch of stuff just off the cuff, like Charles, Kenny, and Shaq and EJ are going to be really funny, and then we'll throw Kevin Hart in there, and he's really funny. And I thought to myself, this isn't working. Like, this off the cuff, these bad jokes. Like, Kevin Hart is the NBA equivalent of Snoop Dogg. Like, they're just so overexposed. And when's the last time Kevin Hart was really funny? Like, in a movie, I saw him do stand up. It was just okay.
He was funny in The Man from Toronto.
Okay.
He was funny in that movie.
I don't get
But I mean, there aren't that many. And not only that, it's the media people are really hard to root for as well. I mean, like, they start the TNT broadcast and Candace Parker's not sitting down, and then Shaq wasn't even there. They came later. You can tell she's got a huge ego. She told Draymond Green, she's like, "You and me could never coach." And it's like, what? Draymond Green's going to be probably a better coach than he is a player. You and me could never coach. I mean, they're just, everybody's got a massive ego.
Well, and next year, here's what's going to be interesting. Next year it's in LA, but it's at Intuit Dome, which is Clippers, but it's not going to be Clippers. And I got to be honest, I don't know that LeBron's going to be on the Lakers. I think what they're doing with the LA thing is obviously they're giving it to Ballmer in the Intuit Dome and they're giving it to LA, but they're sure as hell not giving it to the Clippers. They want to give it to the Lakers in the Clippers home. But look, they're only a few games into this thing, but I don't know if you watched any of the LA game last night. It's Luka standing around. This isn't when Kevin Durant came to the Warriors and they moved the ball and, Clay just touches it to shoot anyway, and Steph can take a back seat and Draymond's going to defend and move the ball. There was everyone, there's only one ball. Well, you could see how it was going to work with the Warriors. Luka's an off the ball shooter because LeBron dominates the ball, and then they take turns. Then Luka dominates the ball and LeBron's an off the ball shooter, which he's not. So, look, I think they're going to do everything they can. They're going to sign Luka to an extension. And I don't know what LeBron's going to do in the offseason because those guys can't play together. They're both ball-dominant guys.
They darkened the arena so they wouldn't see all the empty seats.
It's ugly.
Anyway. Bad. All right, that's going to do it for us. We have one more super, and then we will actually call it right here. We got this one from Faithful. He says, Dilla, Kyle, Buddy, Foot, Samuel, and Juszczyk. Time to sing a different tune, Coach, and say bye-bye.
Oh, he's saying to Juice and to Debo? Well, Debo's gone. I mean, Debo's never going to play again here. And I'd be surprised if Juice did, just because he took a pay cut last year. And that's what I mean. I was watching that video of them in Cabo, and I was watching looking right at Juice. And when Kittle's wife, Claire, said, say go Niners, Kyle Juszczyk did not say go Niners. He just stood there and just waited for like one person to say it. It was George because but Kyle Juszczyk knows what's coming because he ain't taking another pay cut. And like you said, they don't even use him. So what's the point? What's the point of having him?
Manuel Rodriguez, Larry on his boomer talk. Yeah, because I'm sure everybody who's like 20 loved the All-Star game. All right, that's going to do it for us. John, good stuff. Tell people where they can find you and where they can check you out as far as YouTube's concerned.
Yeah, I'm on John Lund Unleashed. If you would subscribe, John Lund Unleashed, johnlundunleashed.com. I got Tolbert on tomorrow. Tom Tolbert. His show starts Monday on YouTube, The Tom Tolbert Show. And so Tommy and I are going to chop it up in the morning about 8:30, if you can believe that Tom's going to be up. But Tom and I are going to chop it up, see what he's doing, and see what his plans are with his new show. So I'm looking forward to that.
That sounds awesome. That sounds awesome.
Thanks, bro.
I will not be streaming in the morning with Damon because I got an 8 a.m., if you can believe this, 8 a.m. dentist appointment.
Oh,
my God.
dude.
Yeah, brutal.
Got to wake up and go to the dentist. I guess it's
I got to wake up
waiting.
at 6 to go to the dentist in the city. Oh,
Are you serious?
Brutal. Yeah.
Dude.
I have to get up early. So I got the dentist tomorrow. I may be back for my stream with Chase Sr. Other than that, you can check me out tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
You can have like an all swollen mouth and you're still going to be talking. Krug will play hurt, man. I know you. Krug will not leave the people who need his Niners talk.
I'll give it.
You'll be back. You'll be all like, you'll be all messed up, and you don't care.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks to BetUS. Thanks to Pig in a Pickle. Thanks to our good friends at Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. For John, I'm Larry. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what